Hey, good morning, quarantine.
Geez, can I? Hey, good Lord, I got my headphones in, Jay.
Sorry, that was my impression of Robin Williams in quarantine. Hey, welcome guys. Welcome to our Saturday morning super class. This is going to be super exciting, but very, very important to what we do, guys. We're going to be talking about the features, the benefits, and the reasons, steps, and documents for Sub 2. And as Scott says, this is just the get her done training. So we're going to start things off. We don't want to waste a lot of your time. We want you to get back to work, back to your families. Thanks for joining us, guys. Scott Moyes is our featured speaker today and has a lot of background in this and a lot of experience that you're not going to want to miss any of this. So make sure that you've got everything put down, that you're not distracted, but you're able to take notes on this. If not, don't worry. We have this recorded and it will be available in the members area. So thanks so much, Scott, for teaching us a little bit and showing us how we can do deals Sub 2. Scott, let us know what you got for us.
Awesome, guys. Well, as you know, I have a one-track mind, and when it comes to real estate, and my specialty, of course, is taking property subject to with the title holding trust transfer, which is a trademark and patent pending process of documentation, and it allows us to take property subject to without the risks and liabilities associated with other subject to methods and so on. Not that those are wrong, it's just they're treated different, and we're going to point out some of those differences and why you would choose to use a trust to mimic any form of real estate transaction. I get questions all the time. Hey, Scott, should I take the property subject to with the trust and then do a lease option? Absolutely not. Should I do sub 2 and do it with a contract for deed? Absolutely not. You do not need to do anything additional once you've set up the trust properly. The trust itself mimics the entire subject to process. There's no need to do a trust and a contract for deed, or a trust and an all-inclusive trust deed, or a trust, right? Anyway, we'll go over that. So I always think that and know from my personal experience that this is, in my opinion, the ultimate way of taking property subject to safely and legally. And of course, most of you on this call and training this morning are already our JV partners. We've asked you to join us to, we would like your input on everything we do as we're building out our new websites, as we're building out our new documentation and processing. We're going to go over the basics today. Again, my name's Scott Moyes. I am known as the Smart REI and the Full Price Offer Guy. I only offer full price for houses. I do not negotiate with sellers on that. If they don't want full price, then more power to them. I just don't know why they wouldn't. And I get in good discussions with people all the time. Why would you offer full price? I'm willing to give you a discount. Because I'm the full price offer guy. Okay. And the answer to everything I always do when people ask, why would you do that? My answer is always because I can. Okay. And then, of course, Jay and Paula Eldrin, my partners in crime here. I should not probably use that phrase, but Jay and Paula are the real estate marketing system hackers, and they use the trust in other methods than subject to. Well, we pretty much take everything subject to, but if you need to fix and flip, or just do a little lipstick on a pig, or you need to assign, or what they're now calling wholesaling, and that kind of thing, that can all be done very simply through the use of a title holding trust, either a simple version or what we're going to be discussing mostly today. So we're going to spend about 2 hours. I'm going to try to keep it under that. I know our first class went 3 hours because you guys had a lot of questions. We're not going to go 3 hours. I can guarantee you that. I'll fall asleep long before that. And I'm the one's going to be doing all the talking. So what we're going to provide, what we provide as far as on our end, especially for our JV partners, it's a total turnkey process. The only thing you ever have to do is locate buyers or sellers. With you, we take care of everything else, all the documentation, all the legal, all the accounting, trustee service, escrow services, and so on. So there's one of the things we don't do, although we've been asked to do it. We do not do or have any type of upsells or to mentoring or coaching or anything like that. We're bringing you on, guys, as full JV partners for absolutely nothing. We just want to do deals, and we want to make our money doing deals. I know, we want to get paid for our time, but we're willing to, let's say, not risk it, but we're willing to do the deals with you. In other words, you find them, we're going to close them, and we split them. Most of our JV partners, we split 50-50 all the profits. You got guys that if you're used to bird dogging and that kind of thing, you sell your assignments or your wholesales or whatever as a bird dog for a couple $1,000s and you're out of there, and the person makes 30, 40, 50 grand on a deal. Well, how come you didn't get half of it? I've always wondered that. Why would you just hand over something to somebody? Well, why not hand it over to us? We'll do it all and split the money. Fair enough? Okay. So what most sellers and wannabe homeowners don't know, and their agents and attorneys don't tell them, either because they don't know or they just don't want them to know, is that did you know that a seller can transfer all the rights of ownership? I didn't say property or ownership of property. I said all the rights of ownership to a property without an actual sale taking place. We'll talk more about the different types of subject to and how those create, and they are creating sales, including lease options, by the way. Some of you have already read my lease option horror story. The IRS ruled on that clear back in 1917. They do not recognize a separate lease and a separate option. People ask, well, what does the IRS have to do with it? Well, if it's a sale, there's possible taxes. So anytime there's the three-letter bad word starting with the T and ending with an X, the IRS is involved in, or could potentially be involved in. We just don't want them in our lives. So a seller can leave all their, and as you guys know through subject to, sellers obviously can leave their financing in place, but there's a potential triggering of the due on sell provisions. We'll talk more about due on sell here later. Can they call and due? Yes. Do they? Most of the time not, but they can. But because I talk about this a lot, I do get calls from across the country quite often, several times a month, from people that are having their notes called due and they don't understand why. They said, hey, I did this thing and I put it in an LLC, or I did this. In fact, we're going to hear from somebody today that put their property in an LLC and their lender called their note due because they were doing a lease option from an LLC. So it does happen, and there's ways to fix that. Okay. So and because we do subject to, not just with the trust here, people can get a much higher sell price if they'd like, and maybe not have to pay closing costs or real estate commissions. Okay. So no wonder the attorneys and agents and so on don't tell their clients about this. In fact, in some areas of the country, you will find that the big real estate brokers are now prohibiting their agents from being involved in any kind of seller carry contract because of all the risks and liabilities. And there are lawsuits across the country of sellers and buyers that are now suing agents, and actually been doing it for a long time, for putting them in these type of arrangements when it all falls through, because you got to be careful, especially if you're an agent and you're licensed. Okay? Guys, there's only two ways to transfer rights of ownership in real property, and that's by deed, right? Cash or credit financing, and by trust. So let me ask you a question, and I do this if I do a workshop sometime. Think about this to yourselves, and I'm going to give you the answers because we're going to get through this instead of waiting for everybody to type stuff in. Although I do like your participation. So by the way, if you do have any questions as we go along, Jay and Paula are monitoring the chat and also the Q&A. Feel free to type in your questions, okay? So what is the worst way to own property? Well, I'll save us all a little bit of time. The worst way to own property is in your own stinking name. And forgive me if I am calling some of you stupid. I'm not doing it intentionally, but it is very stupid to have a property in your own name. You're virtually putting a target on your forehead and say, sue me. I'm dumb enough to have a property property in my own name, okay? And it's not because you're stupid, and don't take me wrong, I use the term ignorant all the time. It just means you didn't know, or nobody's ever told you, okay? So it's not meant to be a cut down or actually tell you you're a real stupid person. You just didn't know. Okay. So what's worse than your own name? How about in joint tenancy or tenants in common? So if your spouse or significant other, whatever, you guys buy a house in joint tenancy, right? You know the difference between joint tenancy, tenants in common? Tenants in common might be 3 or 4 investors that went together, and now they're all on the deed, right? That's tenants in common. Joint tenancies, typically some type of a relationship thing, husband, wife, significant other, whatever, right? But now you got 2 or more people, let's just say 2, that have the property in their name. And each morning you guys take off to work, one goes one way, one goes the other. It doesn't matter which one of you gets into an accident, or which one of you gets sued, or which one of you has an IRS issue. For the purpose of satisfying a judgment creditor's claim against you, you own 100% of the property, and the property can be sold to satisfy the claim, right? So you got to be careful how you title properties. Well, what's worse than 2 people? Obviously more, right? Multiple people. How do you get multiple people's names on your home or your property, right? Now think about this for personal reasons, guys, in your own homes. Why would you ever have a title in your name? Or what? How can you get multiple people's titles? Well, a lot of people don't understand this. Maybe grandma and grandpa put their children on title before they pass away or before they become incapacitated, thinking they're going to avoid probate and take care of the title transfer now. Well, it does nothing of the kind. It makes everything worse because they lose what's called their step up in basis when they do that. Okay. So how do you also get multiple people on your name, but maybe protect yourself from this probate? Well, right, okay, we put the kids on as beneficiaries of a family living trust. I'm sure some of you have one. But did you realize that, and we're going to talk about differences in a minute, when you place your property, real property, which you should never do, in a family living trust, the trust is the owner of the property now. And all the beneficiaries are owners of the trust. Now, I'm sure this doesn't happen very often, but it can. The beneficiaries of a family living trust, where the trust owns the property, if any one of those beneficiaries gets sued, and a good attorney knows this, because all they're going to do is look and see that the property is owned by a trust, it's possible to get to the property through the trust because of one beneficiary that harmed somebody or got sued. So it offers no asset protection or privacy, as some attorneys like to teach. It's not a good way. So you should not have your property in a family living trust. It should be in your own title holding simple land trust. Right? Okay. So so this brings up the question, why the heck would anybody want property in their own name, right? Or put somebody else on the deed? Or how do they put them on the deed? How about by using, and I use this term, I know there's some of you out there that might not like this term, but they put their property when they're selling it sub to and that kind of thing in one of those inherently dangerous types of seller carry transactions. Now, I use that term a lot, and I get arguments about it. Yes, all seller carry have dangers. That's why people don't do them all the time, right? What kind of dangers? We're going to talk about this. So what type of properties work best for, let's just say sub two? Not just specifically like a land trust, but sub two. And most of you know some of this. My favorite is over encumbered, underwater, upside down properties. Although any property, as you can see down here later, any property can do this. Any property can be done sub two. Whether you violate a due on sale, which we'll talk about later or not, doesn't matter, but it's always seller willing, right? So how about those maybe that have little or no equity? In other words, they don't have enough for commissions for agents. Maybe they're, like I said, upside down or over encumbered. They owe what the house is valued at, and they can't sell it. They probably could, but it'd have to be maybe a short sale, or maybe take money and bring it to the closing to sell their house, right? They can't, they're renting it now because they can't sell. Now they're now landlords, and they have all the management duties and upkeep and repairs and tenants and toilets and all that garbage, right? I hate tenants. How about they just want income as opposed to the cash right now? I get that a lot. About a third of the properties I do are free and clear properties. Why would somebody need, or maybe they don't need, maybe they want to do this because they would rather have income, especially when it comes to, let's say, larger single family homes, or if they have, excuse me, guys, or if they have, let's say, commercial plexes. I've got a 12 plex that I do stuff with. I've got a 6-plex. I have 4, which is still residential. But what if it's a rental, and it's non-owner, in other words, and they sell it? There's possible taxes due on the sale of those properties. Well, by using a trust, we'll just bring this in now, by using the trust, if they place the property in trust first, and then they have somebody come in and take over the payments, it's not a sale. And they have up to 3 years to identify another property for maybe a 1031 tax deferred exchange. So it gives them more time. And if they do it properly, we can show them how to probably never have to pay any kind of a capital gain tax again on any property. Maybe they just want a higher price, right? They don't want to pay an agent or commissions or anything like that. They're just like, they're people from central Utah that are just really frugal and cheap people. I'm just kidding. I'm from there. Okay. All right. Any seller willing to take payment, right? So they rent now and sell later. How about probate properties? Maybe properties that need a little bit of work and they're not willing to do it. A lot of this stuff you guys all know, you've been in this stuff too. And then what about zombie? What the heck is a zombie property? I'm not going to go into detail on zombies today, but zombie properties are basically properties that the lender has foreclosed on but hasn't sold, and it's just still sitting there. Do you realize that the title is still in the seller's name? I've run into properties where a year and a half, 2 years later, the property's still in the seller's name. It's a vacant property, and they've never taken title back from the seller or from the borrower, right? What do we do with those? There's some tremendous things that can be done with those. Absolutely incredible cash flow. Okay.
Hey,
So, yeah, go ahead, Jay.
We have a question from Bill Gentry. He says, in states that have dower rights, how does that work in a title holding trust? And I apologize if I said that wrong. Dower or doer?
Yeah, no, you're right. Dower rights, yeah.
Okay.
There is no effect. Everything just stays the same. Just like with title, there's no reason to get new title insurance because it's just a revocable living trust. You mean tell me every time somebody does a family living trust and put their property into it, they got an issue with dower rights or they got an issue with title? No. Transfer a property into a revocable living trust, which the title holding trust transfer is, there's no title, that's the word I'm looking for. There's no title seasoning issues. I'll think of the term here in a minute. No, there's no problem at all with dower rights. Okay, and anybody in every state can do that. Doesn't matter. We'll talk about states here a little bit later. So, okay, so most sellers aren't willing to carry it. Why? Because of all the perceived risks, or they believe they need to sell their current home in order to buy a new one, which is not true. They think, this is my big one, they think they have equity. We run into that all the time. I know some of you do. And they think they need a down payment to buy another house. That's possibly not true, although there are some changes in some of the loan programs these days because of what we're going through right now, where they're increasing the amount people need for a down payment and so on. But hey, what if we could give them all the rights of ownership and put them in another property? I've daisy chained, if you will, so I call it, many times, where a seller says, well, I got this new property I want to buy and I got to sell this one to get the other one. No, you don't. You don't have to buy anything. So we approach the seller of the other property and say, hey, look, you know, they got to get rid of this property, they think, or maybe their lender won't let them buy another property. But here's what's really cool. I'll just bring this in now. What's interesting when using the title holding trust transfer system is that when they are wanting to do this, their concern is, their lender's concern for their new property is typically only going to give them, what, 65, maybe up to 75% a rent to income credit for the property they're leaving behind and just putting a renter in, which is essentially what we do. That can prevent them, especially in nowadays, can prevent them from getting a new property or getting a loan on their new home. Well, we have a letter that goes from the trustee to the underwriter that tells them how to treat this. Because our occupant is in there on a net occupancy agreement, meaning they have to be 100% responsible for the property. And even the IRS treats the resident of the property as the owner of the property and allows them to have all the tax benefits, treats them as an owner. The lender now is able to give as much as a 100% rent to income credit. I've only had that not happen once, and they gave them 95, just enough to get them to qualify for the loan upon it. Okay, that's really interesting. And I don't know too many other, in fact, I just don't know any sub-tours that are able to send a letter from a trustee and tell a lender how to treat this. That somebody else now is 100% responsible, and there is no maintenance, upkeep, or repairs done by the seller. It's done by somebody else. So, and that helps them qualify for even a better loan or even a bigger house if they wanted to. Okay? So here's the thing, guys, you don't need to ever own, emphasis on own, you don't need to ever own a property to profit from. Right? I know people do lease options. Do we ever own the property? Or when I used to do lease options before I knew better, right? No, we don't own it. We contracted for it, if you will, but guess what? We may not think we own it, but you got to be careful, and we're going to, I'll again, that's later in the class today. So J.D. Rockefeller, actually, I think it was his brother that said this, own nothing, control everything. I own nothing, yet I control everything. Somebody always asks, well, how do you buy properties with a trust? I don't. I never do. Well, who does? Not me. I just put somebody in that's going to. You sit between them. Only duty I have is go to my mailbox and get my checks every. So, subject to pros, again, most of you guys know this. We can whip right through most of this stuff. So obviously, subject to, easy to get started. I know the gurus that sell lease options and stuff. It's one of their pitches. It's very easy, and that's true. It's very easy. You need little, if any, cash. For example, most of you know I never pay more than $10 to control a property. And only once have I ever done that, and I paid somebody's back taxes, big deal. And then I took over their property. Obviously, it's easy. We can take over payments. Works really, really well for overcovered upside down properties. Again, sellers, these are pros. Sellers can typically get a better sell price or not have to pay closing costs or commissions in a lot of cases. In most cases, in all my cases. And we can structure multiple types of transactions, not just sub-2. Well, they're all sub-2, but different methods. As we'll talk about here. The cons, all sub-2 potentially and actually do jeopardize the seller's title. I don't care how you do them. Why? Because any sub-2, whatever you want to call it, including lease options, is considered a sale. Now, why is a sale bad? Well, it's not bad. It's just, that's the danger part I'm talking about, right? It jeopardizes the title. Why? Because the person that's in the property, whether you've done a contract for deed, land contract, lease option, lease purchase, all enclosed, whatever the deal is, right? Seller finance, that person, if they have any legal issues, because they're on title, and yes, they are on title with the lease option, they just don't know it. They're not physically on title, but because it's a sale, they have equitable claim of interest in the property. And because they do, if their judgment creditors know this, they can attach the seller's property. Got to be careful, right? Some other cons, maybe property management. Maybe you're managing those properties or you're having to pay. Should never have to pay a property manager ever. There's no reason for it, right? Because our occupants in the title holding trust system, they have to be 100% responsible for the property. All the maintenance, all the upkeep, all, I know what if they damage it, we're going to, right? You might have landlord duties. God, I hate that. Like I said, tenants and toilets suck, okay? Again, it could expose the property judgments and liens. Default, including in lease options, requires foreclosure. So why don't any contract for deed, if they know their rights, I don't care what it says in the contract. If they know their rights and they get the right attorney, like the people that sued me and how I first understood and know about what I'm talking here, they have to be foreclosed on. They can't be evicted. And of course, all forms of seller carry financing arrangements violate the due on sale. Yeah, I know I make a big deal out of it and a lot of people don't. But again, I'm the guy that gets the calls when people say, how do we solve our problem? I know it's being called due because some guy did a lease option on our property. You know, well, how do they fix it? Well, they don't. And just because the payments are current doesn't mean the lender can't call the note due or won't call it due. Is that a good reason not to call it due? Sure. And maybe a lot of lenders out there don't call them due because the payments aren't current. I'm not saying it happens every day. It does actually, but just need to watch out for that. Okay. So here's a good question for you all. What loans are legally assumable these days? Yeah, there's a few out there. FHA's got assumable loans. My mother-in-law refinanced a couple of years ago FHA, and her loan right on it says assumable, but very, very few are assumable. Well, what if I was to tell you that there is federal law that allows a wannabe seller to transfer all the rights of ownership to another party, a tenant, a renter, safely and legally without requiring any lender permission or even their knowledge, and it prevents the lender from calling the note due. In other words, guys, almost all loans can be legal. Now, I won't say loans, I'll say payments. All payments are legally assumable without violating due on sale or even having to notify the lender, but we do. Okay. It's not a secret thing. The lender knows, insurance people know, everybody knows, full disclosure all the way across the board, okay? Lenders call their notes due? Well, again, all the reasons I said, because they can. It's in the contract. There's just, as you see, there's a couple articles here, you can look these up, about what happens when mortgage rates start rising. And if you've seen in the news in the last little while, especially the last couple of days, about all the changes in mortgage rates and all the changes in qualifying and so on. And mark my words, as rates start to rise, and all of us have been taking, I'll say all of us because I used to do it too, all these subject to methods, you're going to see an onslaught, a tsunami of lenders calling notes due. Mark my words. Some of you might not agree with me. I understand that. Sorry, guys, I've seen it. I was living in San Diego when it happened. I was living in San Diego when the Federal Depository Regulations Act of 1982 came into effect, because Coldwell Banker and a couple other lenders and so on were calling notes due for none other reason than people were putting properties in their own family living trust. Why? Because previous to 1982, you couldn't do that. You could, but they could call your note due. And there was many other reasons, people selling on terms, that kind of stuff, okay? So in 1982, that changed. In fact, Jay, Paula, here's what's really interesting, guys. Years ago, when I was in the mortgage business, and I got out because I could no longer stand being treated like a used car salesman. I got involved with a company called City First Mortgage, and Jay happened to be my manager, and his wife Paula was our processor. So I got to know them pretty well. Did some loans. Paula did my processing. Uh, Jay would wag his finger at me or tell me if I was doing things right or not, or how to put it all together, right? And and I did that for quite a long time. And then probably 6 or 7 years ago, I just got out of the mortgage business altogether. And about 2 years, maybe 3 years ago, Jay, I get this call from Jay, and he knew that I did this, the trust thing. I've been doing it for almost 30 years now, and I get this call from Jay, and he says, "Hey, you still doing that thing?" Yeah, well, of course. It's really important you stay in business, guys. And I says, "Yeah, I'm still doing real estate." And he says, "You're still running your real estate club?" And because I started the Wasatch Utah Real Estate Investors Association there, and I said, "Yeah, I'm still doing it." He says, "Well, we left mortgage business too, and me and Paula, you know how good she is. We're investing in real estate now. We're doing fix and flips and things like that. And so maybe we want to talk to your people or talk to you about working together or doing something." And so as we started talking, and I started explaining to him a little more in depth about what we do, he goes, "Hey, we got to get together." So for the last couple of years, Jay and Paula and I have been doing some things together, and now we formed a partnership just for these ventures that we're talking about now. And what's interesting is I got through talking to him, and a little while later, I get this call from Jay and Paula, and they said, "Hey, we got a problem." I go, "Okay, so what's the problem?" "Well, maybe let Jay tell you." Go ahead, Jay.
All right. Hey, can I share my screen?
Sure. Let me see if I can stop sharing mine. Did you do yours, or did I? You must have.
I'm still seeing yours.
Okay, there we go. I wasn't. What in the world? Oh, there it is up there.
There, I can.
Yeah, controls were in a different area. Go ahead.
There we go. All right, you're gonna love this, Scott. Here we go.
Oh, geez, you did that again.
Yeah, we're gonna play a video. This is our horror story.
I did not pay him to do that, guys. Although, you know what? It's really interesting. You know, Superman, Scott Moyes, initials are SM. Is it any wonder?
Coincidence? I think not.
Coincidence?
And he's got a perfect disguise. He's got a pair of glasses. They're non-prescription, but he puts them on, you can't even recognize him.
That's right.
All right. Here we go, guys. This is our horror story for Due on Sell. It happens. So here you go. Have a Due on Sell horror story. And thank goodness for Scott, because it could have been a lot worse.
Jay, can you pause that for 1 second?
Yeah.
And the reason I ask you to pause it is because I need to know if everybody can hear that video that's playing. Because I've tried to do videos inside of Zoom here, and it shows the video but not the audio. Let me get a couple comments. Anybody, could they hear that video?
You type in the chat, just let us know that you can hear that. What do we got?
I hear there's some poor sound on some ends. Scott's going in and out.
The volume.
That's just the way I talk, guys.
Volume's really low.
Yeah, on the video.
Yeah, let's just do this. So it's real simple, guys. We were doing fix and flips, and we're just going along like every other investor does, doing our thing. All the gurus will talk to you. They'll tell you, don't worry about it. They never call a note due. It's no big deal. Well, you know what? It happens because we had a property that we had changed title over. Again, we put it in a LLC, and we were just kind of doing that sandwich lease option thing. And then the bank goes through and does a random title check on us. All they did was instantly they started sending us letters. They started threatening us with emails. We started getting collection notices, and they were telling us the banks are nasty about this, guys. I'm telling you, they are mean. and it's scary. Like, we
Mhm.
were new investors, and it just terrified us. So they said, listen, you've got 30 days to give us, $300,000. And so that's where we called Scott, because he had told us about this and warned us. And obviously, being the smart people we are, we didn't listen to Scott.
Well, and every other guru will tell you that it's not going to happen, and it does happen.
Oh my gosh. So there's our thing. Once it did happen, it didn't stop. And we called Scott. Here's where Scott comes into this. And he just says, okay, guys, this is real simple. We're going to put this in a trust. And now there's that Garn-St. Germain Act, 1982, that he just talked about, that federal law protects protects us
Mm-hmm.
from, and the seller from calling that note due. So when we did all the paperwork, Scott had the trust attorneys put everything together, send across some copies of the federal act that explains what the laws are, and then paperwork showing that we are in a trust and the seller is still a beneficiary of that trust, and basically said, hey, stupid, you can't call this note due. I'm telling you, instantly it went silent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It, like, all the emails, all the threatening phone calls, all the collection notices, everything just went silent. It's not like they apologized to us. It's not like they said, oh, whoops, sorry, my bad, go back to the way things are. They just went quiet, and we're still making payments on that home today.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I'm still getting comments about low volume, but I think that was for the video. Jeff did that, and also Vahi and a few others. So I think we're good up to volume right now, right, guys? Not in the video. Somebody said that I was cutting in and out. I don't know if it was on. There was a couple people, so it must have been on my end. Okay, thanks, Jeff. JC, great. Thanks, guys. Okay. All right, so let's continue. I'll go back sharing my screen here. I know how much you wanted to see me there, but sorry. Hey, thanks, Jay. Guys, this is some serious stuff, and it can really devastate people. I've got on one of our Facebook pages, I think our association page, I had a young lady that posted her story, very similar to mine. And if you haven't read my lease option horror story, I encourage you to do so. In fact, there's a couple of people on here today that are listening just because of that story. And it's not just lease options. It's any subject to. Any subject to is subject to the loan being called due, or can. Not, again, not that they will. Yes, I do make a big deal out of it because I can. Because what we do avoids that, okay? Avoids the triggering. Here's the act, right? Federal Depository Institutions Regulations Act of 1982, known as the Garn-St. Germain. And of course, when applied directly, this federal law makes almost all mortgage payments be assumable safely and legally, and even without lender permission. Although we do notify them, we don't need their permission to do it. Now, let me ask you a question. When you apply this law correctly, again, this is the way to pass on all the fee simple bundle of rights of ownership to renters. Huh? To renters? How would you like to be able to pass on all the fee simple bundle of ownership rights to a renter? Yes, including the active tax write-off and all the tax benefits. Now they have to be a beneficiary of the trust, which they are. We call them our resident beneficiary. They have to agree to 100% responsible. We do file the right documents with the IRS, okay? And under IRS rules, they are being treated as the owner for that purpose, but not for the purpose of being able to attach or lien a property, including by the IRS. The only interest they have is in trust. They have no equitable interest in the property whatsoever. This is where some sellers, some agents, and even attorneys get hung up. There are states, Tennessee, Louisiana, state of Washington, that do not treat the interest in a trust as personal interest. They still treat it as interest in property. And in those states, and there's 4 or 5 others, 3 or 4 others, that do allow the property to be attached in a lawsuit against one of the beneficiaries. Have I done deals in those states? Absolutely. All the other benefits apply. They just need to know. We have a hold harmless agreement that I have people sign that says, look, this is a possibility. And I know some of the guys that be subject to as well. There's a possibility that because we change title, the lender could call the note due, and you just need to know that and agree. Okay? Okay. So here's the actual act that applies to us. Here's some interesting thing. Before I get into the last one there in section 8, did you realize that granting a leasehold of 3 years or more, even if it doesn't contain an option to purchase, is considered a sale by the IRS? Isn't that interesting? Now, I've never heard of the IRS or a lender calling a note due just for a simple leasehold. I've never heard of that. But the point is that they put in the act here that granting of a leasehold interest of 3 years or less, not containing an option, is an exemption under the Garn-St-Germain. And then where we come in, here's the actual law. A transfer into an inter vivos trust in which the borrower is and remains a, that's the biggest word in that whole sentence right there, is the word a, remains a beneficiary, and in which does not relate to the transfer of occupancy rights in the property. The trust does not relate to any type of occupancy rights. Just like in a lease option, and it's valid, we've been tested, there is a separate net occupancy and possessory agreement. Why is that important, and why is it important that the beneficiary is a, or the resident is a beneficiary? Because as a beneficiary, they are treated as an owner, and owners can occupy their own homes. Okay, now back to this word a. I get some people that say, oh, that they say the borrower needs to remain the beneficiary of the trust. No, that's not true. They are not the beneficiary of the trust. They are a beneficiary of the trust. There's a big difference. Do you want to be the person sleeping with your spouse or a person sleeping with your spouse? See, there is a difference.
Hey, Scott.
Anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Question for you. Andrew asked, which states allow the suits to attach?
I know Louisiana, Tennessee, the state of Washington, there's a couple others. In fact, what's interesting is most of those are mortgage states, right? All the other states are like deed of trust states. Most of those are mortgage states. And you know what they do in a mortgage state? The property goes into trust and you become a beneficiary of the trust. Interesting, right? But they don't recognize the interest in trust as personal property. It's recognized as ownership of real property. So, like I said, I know Louisiana and Tennessee. I don't have the list here in front of me, and frankly, I've just ignored it most of the time anyway, but I know those because I've done business in those. And I actually had somebody file bankruptcy in Louisiana. The lender tried to attach the property, and actually the bankruptcy trustee didn't allow it, even though they could. It's kind of strange. Okay, so I can find the list. I don't even have it. Actually, I probably do. I just don't have it right here. Okay. So do you suppose that maybe a renter would pay more for these benefits that they're entitled to enjoy? All the fee simple bundle of rights of ownership, all, emphasis on all, pride of ownership, use and possession, quiet enjoyment, principal reduction on the mortgage note. A renter can get principal reduction, appreciation, equity buildup, and tax benefits. Do you think they'd pay a little bit more upfront or per month to receive those rights, never having to get a mortgage in their name right now or take title? Yeah, they would, believe me. So here's just a few of the benefits. Some of you have seen these before, right? Easier qualifying, right? And payment arrangements for a buyer. They can get in for as little as, I've taken as little as 1% before upfront. Most of the time I'm asking for 5% or more. And these days I'm looking in upwards of 10 and even more. Now I've had people come in. I had one guy on a house that brought in $140,000 up front for a house just to rent it and get benefit. So no down payment. There's terms that you need to eliminate from your vocabulary when we do this. You can't talk interest rates. You can't talk down payments. You can't talk rent credits. You can't talk the word option, right? We'll explain that here in a minute. Again, they get income tax benefits. They get equity buildup. They get a share of the appreciation and note reduction in the property, right? And the property is protected. It's shielded from creditors, judgments, and liens. You realize I use lease options all the time, but it applies to all sub too, that if, let's say the family you put in there, they decide to get divorced and the spouse, one of the spouses sues for half the equity in the property. Well, the property can get attached and does get attached for that. It's not even theirs, yet they're on title. Again, quietly in a lease option, but, right, voids all the bankruptcy issues, voids all the marital disputes, voids all the creditor judgments. Not even the IRS can penetrate a properly drafted, valid title holding trust to attach the property. And I have had them try to do that twice. And the trust prevailed. Okay. Pride of ownership again, right? No debt load. Protection again. What about sellers? What's the benefit for them? How about safe and legal assumption of payments without any of the residents' claim of equitable interest in the property? How about a much better selling price? Guys, I'm known as the full price offer guy. When you see the script that I'm going to show you in a minute that I talk to sellers, my offer is full price or more if they are willing. And I always add or more. Sometimes you might get a seller that says, well, if you want to do, I'm asking 300, but if you want to do this, I want 500. I know that's ridiculous, right? But you know what I say? Okay, your price, my terms. You want 500? And then all the questions come in that I know some of you are asking in your own head. In fact, some of you on this have even asked me, well, how the heck do you do that if it's only valued at 3 and they want 4 or 5? It doesn't matter what they ask. I probably am not just going to give them 5 because they ask. I'll offer what they owe, or maybe a little bit more, maybe 320, 325. But could I offer them the full 500 that they're being ridiculous about? Absolutely. Because then it's just going to take longer for our resident before they can refinance in their name. It's right, their price, my terms. And I can show you many, many, many examples, even properties that were purchased for 1.2 million that are now worth only half of that. And we offered them what they owed, which was 800,000, 200,000 more than what the property was actually valued at. That was back in 2008. Today, that property is valued again at 1.2 million. And there's only about 8-9 years left on the mortgage yet the person we put in the property is paying on until it's paid off. Okay. Faster sell, shorter escrow. We can do this in 1 day. Okay, or less. I've done it in an hour before. Okay. I'll get times where I get a title company. I have a special title company here in my neck of the woods that knows what I do. Used to close there before they wouldn't allow us to close there anymore. I won't tell you why in a minute. But they call me on a Saturday morning about 9 o'clock in the morning. I was still and he said, hey Scott, can you come down and help us out? Something happened to the chain or the title. Can't remember if it was buyer or seller had an IRS issue. And these guys want to sell the house. These guys want to move into the house. And can you do your thing and get it all set up? And because it's going to take a couple of years for them to get this IRS issue taken care of. And these other people need to move. I went down there and I spent a couple hours with them, did all the paperwork and so on. I got paid $8,000 for helping the title company close this deal. Pretty sweet. Okay. Again, avoidance of IRS issues. And on debt relief, for example, on the properties that are short sold, right? Instead of short selling or going to foreclosure and typically on someone's personal residence, they're usually not going to have any debt relief they owe taxes on because they can declare insolvency. I can't remember what the form was. I think it was Form 942. But if it's non-owner occupied and there's debt relief on the house, they're going to get a 1099. They'll owe taxes on that, right? But if they use the trust, when we put somebody in there, we can relieve them of that, right? Instead of having to go short sale or foreclosure. And there's other things we can do even if they do get foreclosed on. Okay.
Hey, Scott.
So yeah, go ahead.
Question here. Farouk says, can you elaborate on shared equity? I'm confused. Why would the buyer not get all of the equity?
Because that's not my deal. That's my deal. And I'll show you that in a minute. I got a script for it, right? We split 50-50, all the equitable growth and appreciation with the buyer, including note reduction. Well, and it can change. All those things are negotiable, but that's a typical deal. Okay, so obviously freedom from loan payments. If they have another house, they don't have to make 2 payments now. They had to move and go somewhere else. Again, more of the same benefits for a seller as their, and for example, ease of collection. For example, I like this one. All the payments are sent to escrow. We don't ever touch the money. The only time we touch money is when we go to the mailbox to get our cash flow check or to get our money that was paid to us up front, right? Seller doesn't handle it. The trustee doesn't handle it. And escrow service handles everything, just like a servicer. The mortgage is paid, the taxes are paid. Of course, most of them are impounded in the payment, okay? And the one thing I really enjoy now, guys, I have done, last count, it was just shy of 400 of these transactions over the last 25-ish years or more. I've only had to start a half a dozen evictions and I've only had to complete 2. The reason is we have other positive exit strategies for either a defaulting party or someone that doesn't want to or can't remain in the property. Okay, we'll go into detail on these some other time, right? So there's no need to have to go through any kind of foreclosures, judicial or otherwise. It's a matter of a simple, nothing simple, but you know what I mean, simple evictions, right? Okay. And I'm going to get to Farouk's question here in a minute. I'm just some of you guys have already seen this. This is a property. Just give you a couple of examples real quick. Growing family. They needed a big house. Actually, they moved out in your neck of the woods, Jay, when we sold this house. So they were valued at 137-ish. They were asking 142.5. They owed 107. Their PITI was 107. And I made them an offer, their full price offer, their asking price more than what the estimated value was, right? 142.5. So payments to the seller were $995 for a 5-year term. Now, actually, it's not payments to the seller because $907 went to the lender, right? And plus taxes, insurance, and so on. So the difference went to the seller. So they got a little bit of cash flow. Okay. So we placed a value on this. Now, when you place a property in trust, okay, you do not place it in there with a sale price. Eliminate the word sale from your vocabulary when doing this. This is not a sale. When you place property in trust, you need to fund the trust by placing the property in the trust, and it has to have a value placed on it. So our mutually agreed value was 147.5. Well, wait a minute, Scott, I thought you offered a 142. Well, I did, but I bumped the equity 5,000 to assure myself of some profit down the road. Called bumped equity, one of the profit centers. So the lease payment we got was $1145. It's on a net occupancy agreement with the first right, not the option or obligation to purchase. If you do an option or obligation, you've created a sale. We do not want to create a sale. In this case, and they have the first right to purchase the property at whatever it appraises for down the road, minus anything that is due back to them by the trust, okay, which we'll explain here in a minute. I have a diagram. So I got 3.5% upfront plus 2 monthly payments to move in. We did a 50-50 equity share, which is also 50-50. That includes the note reduction, okay? And they get all the tax write-off.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
So Justin has a question. Does Does this in any way prevent the seller from buying another property until the property is moved into the renter's name?
No, we already tackled that here several slides back. Remember that when we put a resident in the property and someone's trying to buy a new property, most of the time when you do subject to, or someone just moves out, buys a new house, and then wants to rent out their old house, maybe because they couldn't sell it or they just wanted it as a rental, they usually have to qualify at 65 to 70% rent to income credits on their rental, or when the renter moves in like this, okay? But because the letter we send to the lender coming from the trustee shows the lender how to treat this, and they get usually up to 100% income credit instead of 75, which allows them to actually get a better loan, even a better interest rate, or a better house. The least I've ever been given, and I've only had to do this maybe half a dozen times, was 95%. It was just enough for the former owner of the property here to get their new house. In fact, these people right here, Grant and when they moved out in your neck of the woods, Jay, they moved out to Stansbury Park. When they moved out in your neck of the woods, they are one of the ones we produced the letter for from the trustee. And they got a 100% rent to income credit. Loan went through just like that, okay? So we got 3.5% up front, which is $51.62 plus 2 months of payments. One goes into the trust security account or contingency fund to make the payment on time if the payment comes in late. Okay, it's one of the ways we keep things current. And I know what if they don't pay, all that kind of stuff. You can ask that later. And so our cash flow was $108 a month. Now this was a 5-year deal. So over the 5 years, the note reduction was approximately $15,000, and the property appreciated at about 3% for another $15,000. So here's our profits. Remember that bumped equity we talked about? That was my bumped equity. That's my profit. I collected approximately $4,000 up front because out of the $5,100 I collected up front, that paid for all the legal, accounting, trust setup, and so on. The resident paid that. I didn't, right? I got to keep $4,000 of that. The cash flow on this thing over the 5 years was $6,400, and I also get 50% of the note reduction and appreciation of the property, right? So my total profits, my share, was $30,400 on this. And as most of you know, I never pay more than $10 to do this.
So
My cost was $10.
Another question, Scott.
Yeah.
Kimberly Williams says, this might be a simple question, but can you go over the calculations for the cash flow of 108 for the investor? The lease payment is 1145 and 907 is going to the mortgage payment. Then do you subtract what the seller is getting, about $88?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have another one from Sam as well. It says most of what's taught sub to prospects for medium price range. That's what he's been doing. What price range recommended using the trust?
Any seller willing.
Perfect.
It doesn't matter, right? Max right now is working on properties where some of them are $20,000 and $30,000. Excuse me. I've done multi-million-dollar sales. I just missed one for $32 million a couple of years ago, but he referred me to a friend that the house was $9.5 million in the Hollywood Hills that I did. Did one here in my own backyard. Again, I just mentioned the guy bought the property for $1.2 million, and he was trying to sell it because he was tired of making payments on an over-encumbered house. The property then was only valued at $600, and he put 20% down or $400,000 on it when he bought it. He owed just under $800,000, and I offered him the full $800,000 for his property, and put somebody else in to take the payments. The guy gave me $140,000 up front, which I split with my partner, my JV partner, right? That would have been, you would have been $70,000. We made $1,000 a month cash flow. My partner got 50, I got 50, or 500, they got 500. Now, what's really interesting is there's only 8 years or so left on that mortgage right now. So when the property's totally paid off, just assuming right now it's valued at 1.2 again. If it's paid off and I don't owe the seller anything, and I'm splitting all the note reduction, equitable growth, and appreciation on the property with the guy that came in, All he has to do is finance the amount that he owes me, which in this case will be about 600 grand. You see how I love over encumbered properties, especially those in the $1 million range? So with the arrangement we did with the seller here is until the note's paid off, or as long as it would take. He didn't care. Doctor had money, bought a smaller house, could afford the payments, no big deal, right? But I do this every day with over encumbered properties, and in some of the same percentages as this one. It's all relative, right? A lot of times I love to offer people more than what they're asking, because where the heck is somebody else going to offer them that? Nobody, including paying all the closing costs and commissions if there are any. We'll talk about agents into this. Okay, next book, we need to get through this. I love this house. This is one of my favorite deals of all time, right? And I'll show you a diagram of this because I'm a visual guy. Some of you have seen what I'm going to show you. Okay. So anyway, the value was 234. He had somebody in here on a lease option. He had to evict. And my deal with him is he had to get rid of them before I could take over, which he did. Okay. And I kind of actually helped him on it. So he was asking 231, valued at 234. He owes 178. PITI was 1025. I offered him the full 134. Now, why did I offer him 3,000 more? Because he agreed to put in new carpet and paint in the house, which cost him $3,000. So I offered him 3,000 more. All right. So, and the payment that we agreed to was $1,200. So that obviously is going to give him $175 of cash flow if we did that, okay, on a 5-year term. But the mutually agreed value in the trust, we put the property in there, was 239. Why? Again, 5,000 for my bumped equity. We'll see that here in a minute. So I was getting $1,475 a month out of this house. Actually, $1,375. I lied. $1,375 out of this, right? With the lease, the first right to purchase, not option or obligation. Collected 3.5% plus 2 monthly payments. 50-50 split equity share and note reduction with the resident getting all the tax write-off. Here's our profit centers. Here's my bumped equity, $5,000. Beautiful house, big backyard, great deck. Oh, I love this place, right? So the guy came in, I wrote down, don't worry about the word down, I hate that word. He came in with 3.5%, where the family did. It was a Brady Bunch type family. They just got married, had a couple kids each. Came in with 83.65 plus 2 monthly payments. Cash flow was 275 a month, actually 175. Again, I made a calculation error there. Note reduction over the 5 years is 18 grand. Appreciation was 21. My upfront bumped equity profit that I would get at the closing is 5,000, plus my cash flow that I had over the years of 10,500. I got 50% of all the note reduction and appreciation, which my part was $19,500. My total profit, 35,000 for a $10 bill.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
Question from Farouk says, in the last example where you paid $800,000 on the over encumbered property, what happens if the buyer defaults?
I just evict them and put somebody else in. Why would the guy walk away from 140 grand? Although the doctor walked away from 400 grand. Anytime somebody, that's what's great about what we do. There's other more positive options if people need to leave the house or need to be evicted. We don't ever have to evict, buyer willing. Why? We can just sell they have the right to sell or refinance the house. Now, in the evictions that I actually went forward with, the value of the house wasn't enough to pay them back the money that they brought in that's refundable to them. And they just stopped paying. So we had to evict them. But they actually have to pay for their own eviction. And because they're an owner of the trust, they actually have to be one of the people evicting themselves. Interesting, right? So we bring that up. I had to bring that up when I went to the eviction court, and so on. But we can just sell their interest in the trust for what they came in with. In fact, great time for that question, because this deal right here, if this would have gone 5 years at this is exactly what would have happened. However, the Brady Bunch family, after living there 8 months, decided they didn't want to be married anymore. And they said, look, can we get out? Sure you can. If you'll show the property to somebody, I'll replace you as a beneficiary and as a resident, and I'll give you most, if not all, your money back. I was able to give them back $7,000 because the next guy coming in, Glenn, brought in 12 grand. And because I didn't have to pay for closing costs and setup anymore, all but $250 went right in my pocket, minus the $7,000 I gave them. I ended up putting $5,000 more in my pocket. I raised the rent $100 a month. Now I'm making $275. And what's really interesting is when this thing sold with just under 5 years, it's actually went only 3.5 years. The house sold for $305,000. I made almost $70,000 on this house, not 35. Pretty cool.
Hey,
Right?
Scott.
Yeah.
We've got one here that says larger, more expensive homes are harder to move, so finding a renter buyer to fill it, sub 2, may be more challenging. What do you do to market for that renter buyer for such a unique home?
Well, I take issue with what you said. They're harder to move. They are not. They're not any different. It only took me 3 weeks to find somebody for the $9.5 million, and it only took me one phone call to get the guy for the $1.2 million house. It's one of the things we're going to teach you how to do. Okay. They're not any harder. In fact, in my personal opinion, they're actually easier. Why? You're dealing with a whole different class of people that have resources. I had a guy call me, guy from Iraq or Iran or something, and he just didn't want a house in his name ever. He didn't want to have to buy it, then put it in trust. So what we did is we created trust. He brought in all the cash to buy this house for cash. And now the trustee owns the house and he appears nowhere. Yet he has all the benefits as if he just got a mortgage or bought it in his name. Just because he wanted to. And we're talking like a couple $1 million here. They're all over the place. I have places in Park City, Utah, multi-million-dollar homes. Guess where I put my ad? Vanity Fair magazine in Hollywood. You got anybody here know who Mike Lookinland is? Come on, that's a quiz. I want somebody to answer. Anybody? Somebody answered.
No.
We got a lot of no's.
Oh, no, his name's not Nose. Mike Lookinland was Bobby of the Brady Bunch. He's a producer for a private producer of the company that contracts with Disney and so on, and the what's that romantic channel? Whatever it is, right? My wife eats that stuff up. Okay, so he produces a lot of those films. Well, they do a lot of them. They film in Park City, Utah. I met him because I was participating in a celebrity softball game one day, and I met Mike. He asked me what I did. I told him. He says, "Hey, we're trying to move our operations here, and we need a house with about 7 bedrooms. You got any like that up there?" Well, geez, every house up there's got 7 bedrooms almost, right? So I did a deal with Mike. He's still in that place with 7 bedrooms or more to house all of his production people when they're there doing films. They gave me a whole entire year advance on lease, and I've been paying annually for the last 6, 7, 8 years. Guys, they're all over the place. You got to just put yourself in the right circles. Okay, so value doesn't matter. The guy I made an offer on with the $32 million property, I could even show you pictures of it that he sent me. Let's just call him John. I can't tell you his name. He made me promise. His house is on the point. He calls it the ultimate house in the world. It's on the point at Laguna Beach. On one side, it's all glass, by the way, 3 stories. You look down one side, it's all beach houses and sand. On the other side, it's all rocks as you head north. It's absolutely so freaking amazing. It's unreal. We couldn't come to an agreement, right? This guy travels the world. All he does is taste food. He gets paid for it. TV guy, right? You may all know it. But he didn't do my deal. No big deal. Most don't. But he referred me to a young lady from Baywatch, celebrity, that couldn't sell her house for what she owed and didn't want to take the hit. So we found another unknown celebrity, a B person, not an A person, but a B person, that said, oh, I'd love to have that house, but I can't get a mortgage for that, but I can afford the payments. So they brought in a good chunk and took over the payments. Okay, so I got to get going here. Here's a diagram of the deal we just outlined. Now I'm a visual guy, so here you go. He's asking 231, owed 174. The offer I made him was 234, but I bumped the equity 5,000. You can see the little 5,000 in the middle. So here's the deal, guys. There's two types of interest in a trust, in these trusts. There's equitable interest, which is the actual cash. And there's ownership or beneficial interest, which is the percentage. Our offer, as I'm going to show you here a little bit, our offer is not to acquire a property or an interest in a property. Our offer is to acquire an interest in a trust. Guys, we are not dealing with real estate. We're dealing with real or personal property, not real property. So when this property goes into trust, Mike, who was the seller here, his equity is an even 60 grand. That is his refundable contribution or equity in the trust, just like equity in his house. Our offer is to acquire a 90% interest in the trust. Why 90%? Because the law requires that the seller remain a owner or beneficiary of the trust. And it's believed that the minimum needs to be 10%. Okay? So we just make 90% offer. And you can see there between me and the resident we put in is 90%. Now, when this thing goes forward at termination, which I showed you the profits already, when this thing goes forward and the resident refinances or we sell the property, what happens is the seller, right, first of all, the loan's paid off, then any closing costs or real estate commissions are paid, if there happens to be any. In this case, there wasn't. Then the seller gets his 60 grand. And returns or gives me or us their 10% ownership in the trust because they no longer need to be an owner because we're selling the property. That means I now have a 50-50 split with the resident. My upfront profit, not upfront, I already made upfront about 4 grand, right? My profit bumped equity is the 5,000. Whoops. Okay, there we go. I now share 50-50 with the resident on all the net proceeds of the sale of the property, which I already showed you. So I got, what was it? I got, just to say it's this one, I didn't, 19.5. So they also had 19.5 coming to them, plus their $8,365 that they contributed to the trust to pay all closing costs and investor profit. Investor profit's a closing cost. Did you know that? Again, rent was $375, right? $1,375. Cash flow was $350. The owner, seller beneficiary got $200 a month, and I got $150. And of course, when we did this and got somebody new in there, I made $250. So everybody understand that diagram? Again, I draw this out on every property I do just so I can see it in my head. Okay. Any questions on that? Yeah, go ahead.
We've got one that says, is there any need to have a renter buyer have an independent attorney review these documents so if it's ever challenged, we have that on record?
Need, no. Requested and always recommended. Now, you brought up the word buyer. Throw that word right out too, because there's no buyer yet. And you also brought up the term challenged. Has anybody ever challenged? Yes, not many. Has anybody ever been successful? Absolutely not. This trust transfer has been challenged, I'll just say several times, including by an assistant state attorney general, including by the IRS, and including by a couple of residents with their attorneys, and has prevailed 100% of the time, period. Why? Because it's done right. Okay. Just another house real quick. This was an over-encumbered house, not quite as big as the one I told you about, but value was 175. They owed 198, so about $23,000 more, right? Payments were 1565, but the fair market rent was only 1300. But I offered him 218. Huh? I offered him 40 grand more than what the value of the property was and take over the payments. But remember their price or what I offered. Now, the reason I offered this guy more is because he agreed to a longer term, and he's a friend of mine on a 10-year term.
Okay, one more question. Jake March says, you mentioned that the seller will still have the tax advantages of home ownership. I'm assuming this is the mortgage interest they keep in place, correct?
Correct.
What tax advantages do we have in the agreement? Do we still recognize depreciation and or other benefits?
The seller remains and gets the depreciation credit. The resident gets all other credit, all active tax write-off.
So what do we get as an investor?
Nothing except cash flow.
Thank you.
Because you're not an owner of the property and you're not the one occupying it. The IRS under section 163H4D of the Internal Revenue Code requires that the resident, the one that occupies the property and agrees to be 100% responsible for the property, and you can read the IRC if you want to, is the one that is entitled to the active tax write-off and all the fee simple bundle of rights of ownership. Okay. What do we get? We got a free property for $10, if you call that
Awesome.
free.
I got another one for you, Scott.
Yeah.
It says if someone came with a massive down payment that would upset the cash flow math, correct? If so, do we merely grab some money each month that you collect and allocate that towards the underlying seller payment so it is paid in full?
Good questions. So let's say I had a guy come in with $250,000 on a $500,000 property one time. Could I minus the couple $1,000 it's going to cost for legal and accounting and so on? I could have put all that in my pocket. Of course, the term would have to be real long, right? So I didn't feel good about wanting to put that in my pocket. So here's what I did. I put 50 in my pocket. Put the other $200,000 in the trust contingency account, which actually helped make part of his monthly payment every month. So let's just say the payment was $3 grand. And the contingency account made $1,000 of it. He made $2,000. So his payment was totally $3 grand a month. But the contingency account out of that $200,000 was making $1,000 of it every month. He's still in the property, by the way. It's in California. Okay. So I think that's kind of what you're asking. So what happens is, let's say and it's a 10-year deal, by the way. And I don't even know what that property's valued at now because we did that one like 12 years ago, 12, 15 years ago. So I'm sure it's more now. But the point is that he's only had to make a $2,000 out of his pocket every month from his income. But he didn't want to, he's a gambler. He does the horses. And he didn't want to lose that money. So he made that a contribution to the trust, which is fully refundable to him minus anything that was paid out, right? So over, let's say 10 years, that's going to be 120 grand at $1,000 a month out of the contingency fund, right? So he's going to have, what, $80,000 left to offset his purchase at termination, minus his share of the equitable growth and appreciation as well. So that's how that works. I hope that answered your question. Yes, no, maybe so.
Any case law or ruling that would defend.
Okay, so the bottom line on this one, and I know you're reading that. The bottom line on this one is, look, I made 17 grand on that on my buddy's house that was over encumbered. It's actually not even done yet. But I put today the value is, well, that's not true anymore because today the value is $450,000, not 245.
Hey,
At
Scott.
245, I'd make 17 grand, right? So pretty good deal. Go ahead.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Hey, so Farouk says, and this is a good question. Can I, as an investor, also occupy the property if I want to live in one of the units?
Sure. I'm doing that right now myself and have for the last 15, 20 years. I don't own anything, remember? I'm a resident beneficiary of one of our own trusts. Except my deal with the owner here is I get 100% of the equitable growth and appreciation and note reduction on the property. And when I got into it, it was valued at 310. Today it's about 450. I've been into it just short of 3 years. And I get it all. Didn't ever have to get a mortgage.
We've got a couple more for you. We've got any case law or rulings that would defeat that claim.
No.
Okay. What happens on the property when it's sold and you are not available? You get hit by a bus or die?
I don't need to be available. It's all mapped out in the trust. Everything that happens. Beneficiaries just write a letter of direction to the trustee to sell the property and distribute the proceeds. So if let's say as an investor beneficiary or any of the beneficiaries passes away, everything avoids probate for one thing because it's a trust, right? And typically what I recommend for really anybody is that you either take your interest in the trust. I always take it in the name of my LLC, right, or an LLC. The beneficiary, as long as the seller remains a beneficiary of the trust, they can remain a beneficiary of the trust by actually having their family living trust as the beneficiary. So if someone passes away, for example, it's just part of their estate.
Okay, one more here. How do they get around the fact that an assignment of a beneficiary interest to an unrelated party can be seen as a sale or real estate or the interest transferred? Doesn't the resident have a convertible ownership interest at the county level and the IRS level?
Absolutely not. They don't. Guys, this is an interest in personal property, not real estate. Forget real estate. This is a quiet assignment. The only thing that's recorded is a deed to a trustee of a revocable living trust. Anybody can be a beneficiary of a revocable living trust. When you place your siblings or whatever as beneficiaries of your trust, you're assigning them an interest. The difference between this and a family trust is that the trustee owns the property, and in a family trust, the trust owns the property. The trustee is now the legal owner of the property, nobody else. There is no interest in real property, except those states I mentioned earlier, right? That's how they treat it. You can assign interest to anybody. And personal property interest in a trust is not attachable in a lawsuit. You should know that by being a member of an LLC. Your interest is not attachable in an LLC. It's personal property. But a judgment creditor can get a charging order against you, not your interest, but against you. And as a beneficiary or a member of an LLC, eventually, if you ever receive any compensation, you are obligated to notify them that you received it. It is not automatic. It's not a lien or an attachment. And what's really interesting is just like an LLC, it's treated the same way with a judgment creditor. If they sued you for 100 grand, slip and fall, whatever the case is, maybe you owed some money or you bet on too many ponies, okay? they have to pay the taxes on their judgment or on their charging order as if they received all the money today, even though they may never ever receive a dime. You want to pay taxes on 100 grand on money you never received? That's why you very rarely ever see charging orders. Why? Because people know if they got to pay the tax, I'm not going to sue them just because they have to pay taxes, right? Does that answer any of the questions? That probably came from Andrew, right?
Yeah, he's got
I
another.
know his questions. We've had conversations.
Knows him. That's right.
I can't even see, but was it Andrew?
Yes,
Yes,
it
it
was.
was.
Yeah, yeah, he's great. He's awesome.
We got more too.
Yeah, he said
Okay, go ahead.
there is not any case law or rulings that would defeat that claim.
No,
He
He
says
said
thanks.
although I can share some things with you privately. I don't want to mention names or places, but you know, I think he knows a little bit about a couple of them. He's done some of his research. You know, there was a case in Ohio. Somebody actually violated our copyright and everything and stole our documents and tried to use what we did. Even named us trustees illegally. We had no idea. And so the person, the state attorney general, that's not the one. That's the one in Ohio. They actually threw in some federal charges, racketeering and disguised mortgage agreement, all that kind of stuff, TILA, all those things, and sent us out of the room to negotiate a settlement. We said, no, we're not settling, period. We're not settling because we did nothing wrong and this guy stole our stuff. And what they did is they offered him not exemption. What is it? They offered him, you know what I'm talking about, if he would testify against us that we taught him how to do this. Well, okay, we taught him because he attended a Saturday morning class like this, got a copy of a book that had our limited documents in it, and tried to use it to screw somebody, and they sued him. So when they sued him, the attorneys got involved and then said, name the people that taught you how to do this, and we'll give you immunity, that is, and we'll go after them because like you got no money and they probably do. Well, we didn't either. We don't hold money. The trustee doesn't hold money. He only owns property, and he's exempt because he doesn't have any power of direction. So when we went out, I'll say we, I wasn't there. So we went out in the hall and started talking settlement, said, no, we're not, we're right. Went back in, sure enough, judge says, sorry. And they threw it out. What's interesting is our legal costs were about 200 grand. The attorneys forgave the entire balance because they learned so much. Pretty sweet. And those attorneys, by the way, are, I'll say some of the attorneys, there are a couple firms around the country today that are going back through records and finding tenants, former tenants that have been in lease options that were wrongfully evicted. And they're going back and contacting them and say, how would you like that house back? And we're talking some of them up to 20 years ago. How would you like the house back, or how would you like a nice settlement? And they're representing tenants that have been wrongfully evicted from lease options or sub-twos or whatever the deal is, and getting at least their money back, if not more. And agents are being sued by those same companies or gone after for just recommending that they do lease option or something similar that fell through either by a seller or a buyer representing either one, whichever one comes to them, right? It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I personally, I don't know why anybody would ever even think about doing a subject to type transaction without a trust in place. Now, this brings up an interesting thing because you guys are going to talk about flips and things in a minute. Can you buy in a trust? Yeah, absolutely. Just like my buddy from, I can't remember, it was Iraq or Iran, came in with a couple $1 million and bought a house cash. The trustee actually bought the house, and he is a beneficiary of that trust now, right? Free and clear. Can you buy? Yeah, you can buy with a trust. I have talked to some people even as late as yesterday that say, okay, well, we always use a trust for all of our deals, and then we do a lease option. Why? You don't need to do any other form of seller financing or subject to lease option, contract for deed, or anything if you're using a trust. Why? Because the trust is the deal. The trust is what lines out everything. It totally mimics any form of real estate deal, period, and eliminates all those risks and dangers. No claims of equitable interest. You don't need a lease option behind it. You don't need a contract deed attached to it. The resident becomes a beneficiary and is there on a net lease, a net occupancy agreement with all the features and benefits that you would spell out in your sub 2 are spelled out in your occupancy agreement. And they actually get more benefit because they get benefit of note reduction, equitable growth, appreciation. And here's what, let me really throw one at you. So, if we have to evict them, even if we have to evict them, they're entitled to all their money back? Oh my gosh, then why in the hell would you do that? Well, because it's all their money back minus all the costs of eviction, all the costs of either in putting new people in or real estate commissions if need be, right, of the sale of the property if you need to. And in most jurisdictions, triple damages. The very first eviction I ever did, she was $12,000 behind because the seller said, oh, give her another chance, because he knew her. I'm like, no, guys, Harvey, you can't do that, dude. You got to get rid of her. She's going to just keep on taking advantage of you, right? And he used to do lease options, and he's like a really nice guy. I said, that's the one reason you stopped doing the lease options. It's because of this stuff. You're just you're being a landlord, an easy landlord. Quit doing that. So here's the deal. So we go into the, well, because of triple damage and so on, she actually owed us $30,000 according to the judge. So the deal was with her is, okay, great. You can move out now. And the judge agreed. And what we didn't know is she had already moved out like a week before. But still, right? So, and now, what if you did owe them money back? What if we owed them like 10 grand? Could that happen? Absolutely, it could. But our deal with them is they need to sign off on this. That if we owe them any money and we have to evict them, or we owe them any money because maybe we sold the house shorter after they left than what was owed to them, there wasn't enough to pay them, that they would receive monthly payments over 10 years at 0% interest. And only after the property was sold. But again, like I told you, have I had people that needed to move or had to move or we wanted them to move? I say, yeah, you know what? I don't want to do an eviction on you. I know you're a month behind. Your contingency fund is exhausted. You need to get out. But I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll sell your interest like a cash for keys thing. I'll sell your interest and give you some money to move. No eviction. Shorter time. Happy, happy, happy customer and resident. And then they refer people to you because you were so good to them. And it didn't affect their credit because all of our lease payments are also reported to Transamerica. And they build their credit. Right? Some of you do that.
Got a good question here from William Gentry. Is there any possibility of this working with a reverse mortgage?
No.
Okay, good answer.
Could they put their house in trust? Yes, most people do. But you know why? Because as soon as they move out, you've only got 6 months before the lender sells the house. And they first offer it to I know this happened in my family. You got 6 months that gives let's say the family an opportunity. They get the first right to buy the house before the bank sells it to someone else. Any more?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okay. So can you use this? And I'll have Jay and Paula talk about a couple of their deals, and then we'll close some things down. I'll show you some documents and how we process everything. So can you do flips, fix and flips, assignments, wholesales, if you will? Absolutely, right? Let me give you the example real quick of a flip, and then I'll have Jay talk to you about some fix and flips and assignments that they do. So the very first flip, if you will, and now it doesn't a flip. I just call it a flip because it's the closest thing to it. You know, you can use a simple version of this trust, just a few $100s, right, to literally flip a house without ever having to do a double or simultaneous close or get bridge funds or anything like that, right? Forget all that stuff. So I'm driving down the street one day. I see a guy putting a sign in his yard as a for sale by owner. I stopped. His name's Dan. I talked to Dan. His wife was Teresa. He met her when he was on a Mormon mission in South America and brought her home, married her. But now her mom is really, really ill and is probably going to die, never knowing how long. So Teresa had been down there a couple months taking care of mom. Dan was real lonely without his wife. So he wanted to be with his wife. So he decided they'd sell their house. He'd moved down there for a couple of years, up to 5 years, and then move back, buy another house after mom passed away and so on. Well, Dan was just putting the sign in the yard and he owed $115,000. All he wanted was $10,000 out of his house to move. That's all he wanted, because he knew he could sell it quickly at 125, he thought. So I says, oh, okay, you're asking 125, and then he told me you needed his 10 grand. I go, now wait a minute, Dan. This is real estate. You're asking 125, you owe 115. Where's your $10,000? He says, well, yeah, 125 minus 115. Says, no. You don't understand. That entire amount is going to be taken up in closing costs, either attorneys or commissions or whatever. You're not going to get 10 grand, not even close. I says, you might walk away with a couple thousand. In fact, depending on the deal, you may have to pay to move. He says, I can't do that. I got to leave in 3 weeks. I says, well, I'll tell you, I told him my offer. My offer is full price if he's willing, and I'll pay him more. I think I offered him 130, 135, not knowing what the value of the house is really at the time. And he says, God, I can't do that because I need the money, yada, yada, yada. He's the guy that I paid his $700 in back taxes, the only time I ever put up money, right? Which I agreed to do. And I says, Dan, you know what? What if you can't sell it in 3 weeks? What's going to happen? Let me help you market the property. Now, I'm not an agent. How can I do that? So I says, let's do this. Why don't we put the property in trust in your name for your benefit? We'll start marketing the property. If we can't sell it outright by the time you leave, then I'll put a resident in there at least to start making the payments until we can sell the property. I would just put a renter in, okay, not a resident beneficiary. Just put a renter in. I'll take care of it for you. So I changed the sign a little bit, put it in his yard. A couple of days later, I get this call from a lady. She says, yeah, I was just driving by the house, saw the sign, says something about lease to own or whatever. She says, would you just consider selling outright? And that she happened to be an agent. And I says, well, let me talk to my partner and see. So I just hung up. A couple hours later, of course, I didn't talk to Dan. We already had our deal. I called her back and I says, yeah, we might consider that. Why don't you make us an offer? She says, well, sold it outright. What would you ask? And I said, you know what? I haven't even done comps yet. She says, okay, well, you know what? I'm an agent. I got all these things ready for me. Why don't I just go do comps and I'll give you a call back? So she went and did her comps. Now, I was fairly new at this time. It was almost 25 years ago. Okay. And she gives me a call back a little while later. She says, well, my comps showed that it comps out at 155. And of course, in my head, I'm jumping up and down and screaming for joy. and she says, let me talk to my client and see what they're willing to offer. Now, she knew a lot about the area, and we were in an appreciating market. So she hangs up. She calls me back a little later, and she says, I think we want to make an offer. My client likes the house. It's a small 2-bedroom getting started type of house. And they like the house. I've already brought them by. They like the outside, but they don't even need to take a look on the inside because we already talked. It was really nice, and Dan fixed it up. And she says, okay, so they're willing to offer you the 155, but they want you to pay all the closing costs. Typically how things go, right? So we said, wow, let me talk to Dan and see if, I don't know if she thought I was an agent or not, but I said, let me talk to Dan and and see if that's okay. So I talked to Dan, called her back, and now my deal with Dan was this: anything I got over 125,000, I got to keep. All he wanted was 10 grand. As long as he got 10 grand, I could keep everything else, right? Well, they agreed to pay the closing costs. So we sold the house for 155. Our net was 30 grand. Our share net, 40 grand really, because Dan owed 115. So we sold the house at 155. We got 40 grand. Dan got 10, and I split the 30 with him. I sent him a check for $25,000 minus the 700 and something dollars I paid for his back taxes. And I made 15 grand. And I didn't ever give him a $10 bill. Now, that's how you flip it. Here's how it went. Real simple. Place the property in simple trust. Have the seller assign you an interest in the trust. Then you write a letter of direction to the trustee to sell the property and distribute the proceeds. One sale, one close. No double or simultaneous closings, right? No cash needed. Nothing. You don't need to go get an assignment or a wholesale or get paid before or during the sale. You do get paid during the sale. You're one of the owners of the trust. You got your deal. It's all lined out. Just wait for your check from the trustee. Or in this case, our title company, same title company I always use, wrote us the checks right at the closing. Right? Any questions on that? Then I'll let Jay and stuff talk about some of their, a little bit how to do the fix and flips and assignments, and then I will talk about some documents. Show
We
you the
do have
document
a few
process.
questions for you.
Okay.
First one is, how often are you paying a monthly spread to the seller?
That's a great question. I never, ever, ever give cash flow to a seller. Ever. Does that mean they don't receive anything per month? No. So for example, remember the example I showed you here? Let me show you what I did right here. This example right here, our cash flow, or the cash flow in the property, is $350 a month. The seller was getting $200 a month. Does it say cash flow? No. You know what it is? It's payments towards equity. So sometimes a seller will, how much do I get? Well, how much do you want? Oh, I want 10 grand. Or in this case, he says 60. I want all my, well, do I get any of it up front? No, you don't. But I'll tell you what, if I was to buy equity, I'm an investor, right? And if I was to buy your equity from you, the most I'd ever pay you is 50 cents on the dollar. And I typically only give anywhere from 10 to 30 cents on the dollar. So it's either like 20 grand now or 60 grand later. What do you prefer? Oh, well, I'd rather have my whole 60. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you payments to your 60 grand every month. Who's actually making that payment? The resident, not me. But here's what's really cool. So if that's a $200 payment towards 60 grand over 5 years, 2,400 bucks a year times 5, you know what that is, guys, to you and was to me? That's delayed cash flow to me, because I get it all back at the closing. And he gets his 60 grand minus $200 a month for 5 years. So he gets the difference, right? Is that not cool or what? That's why I never give cash flow to sellers. He says, well, I was getting $200 a month, cash flow on my lease option. I said, okay, I'll give you dollar for dollar, 100% payments to your equity. And it's not even a note. It's just a $200 payment towards equity every month. Does that answer that?
I think so. I've
Okay.
got another one for you.
Yeah.
How many times have you intended to take down a deal from a seller and then realize that the money needed from the third BI is never going to be sufficient to cover the underlying mortgage payment?
Never.
Sorry, go ahead.
Never. Simple question, simple answer. Never.
All right.
Why? Because guess what? As we go through the doc process here in just a minute, you're going to find something very interesting. We take the property, okay? Our offer is to acquire an interest in a trust, but we don't actually acquire the interest in the trust until we find our qualified resident beneficiary, which means the money coming in has to cover all the costs, has to give me my profit, and the monthly payment has to be affordable and sufficient enough to cover everything and maybe even give me good cash flow. If it doesn't, guess what? My non-exclusive option is for up to 90 days. If I can't find a resident for the property under those terms in 90 days, my option expires. And it's non-exclusive. Why? Well, don't you want to tie the property up? No, I don't. It's non-exclusive so that the seller can continue marketing or selling their property any way they see fit, and I don't ever have to make payments or give them any money up front. Has it ever happened that I get to 90 days and I haven't found somebody? Absolutely. Happens all the time. Now, I will say that all the time, really not. Because it usually only takes 30 to 45 days to find the resident that I'm looking for. And I never go into a deal, and Paula has some great profit spreadsheets that she uses with us, right? And I always know, if I'm taking a property over for 10 bucks and I get more for a lease payment than the actual mortgage payment, what needs to be calculated? Nothing. How hard is it to evaluate a deal if you're only paying 10 bucks and somebody else covering all the payments and giving you money up front for the right to do that? I don't need a spreadsheet. I don't need a calculator. My return on my $10 is infinite. And I only put in people that can afford the payments that we have. And they're all affordable. Do you realize that this former renter that is now going to become one of our renters or our beneficiaries, right? They were renting a house for $1,000 a month, and now they want to buy one, but they can't. But they see my ad and go, ooh, let's call Scott. So they call me and say, yeah, I'm asking for $1,250 a month plus XXX up front and 2 monthly payments. Oh, wow. Well, we're only paying $1,000 now. We just kind of wanted to keep it there. But, then I ask them this. Say, now, wait a minute. Have you ever owned a house before? I usually like to do it with people that have owned before. Why? Because they're going to understand what I'm going to tell you right now. Making a $1,000 rent, whether it's an apartment or a house payment, is the same as making a $1,500 a month house payment in the lowest tax brackets. Now, tax things have changed a little bit, so I'm going to kind of pull that back just a little bit because I'm not familiar with some of the new tax law because they've lost some little bit of benefit. But I'm only asking $1,250. But here's what I would tell them: look, why is it the same as a $1,500 a month house payment in the lowest tax brackets, 30 between state and federal? Is because now you can go to your employer and adjust your withholding to keep $500 more a month in your paycheck. Now, if I'm asking $1,250, that means you're going to give me $250 more than what you've been paying, and you get to put $250 in your pocket every month. I'm increasing your net pay at home by $250 a month by you now getting into this house as opposed to renting for $1,000 a month. Now, I know most people aren't going to understand that, especially renters, right? That's why I say, look, you're entitled to all the tax benefits, and because of your tax deduction and so on, right, you're going to be able to afford a $1,250 a month payment. And that's what my payment is. If you can't afford that, then thank you much for playing. Click. Have a nice day. Next.
All right, next question then.
Okay, go ahead.
How exactly are you paying a buyer's agent on these deals?
How do they normally get paid? Same way, nothing different. If I got an agent involved, they need to come in with more money. I'm not paying them, they are. I have buyer's agents every day call me. Hey, I got a guy, he wants a house. Wouldn't qualify, doesn't qualify. Do you have a house for him? I'm looking for one right now in the Ogden and Roy area for one of my friends. He had his agent call me. Dave wants a house. He wants to do a lease to own. He's going to sell his house now and take all the cash. He's got 100 grand in equity, and he just wants to do your deal because he wants the benefits, but he doesn't want to have to buy a new house yet because he thinks prices are going to just bomb over the next couple of years, and I do too. But besides the point, right? So how do they get paid? Well, The resident coming in brings in enough money to pay the agents. Now, here's another interesting thing. We're only talking about a lease here. We're not talking about a sale. How do agents get paid on leases? They get a lease commission. What's a lease commission? Typically 1 to 2 months of monthly payments. So here's the deal I make with the agents. Okay, you get a lease commission now. Payment's $1,500 a month. You're going to get $1,500 bucks, right? And then when they buy the house, you're the agent of record. I don't care if it's 3 to 5 years down the road. When they buy the house, you're going to get a sale commission minus the $1,500 you've already been paid. Most of the time, I've got one agent that gets 14 checks from us every month because he agreed to take his commission as monthly payments. And it goes directly to him. His broker, which is a flat fee, paid $500 bucks, and the agent gets $100 a month on every one of these properties until he's paid his commission. And if the house sells before that, then he gets the difference or minus what he's already been paid. Does that answer questions on realtors?
It sure does. He says that makes complete.
I've got agents. I got a couple agents in California that have made several million extra dollars in commissions over the last 20 years, representing buyers or sellers to do this transaction. By the way, some of you know, what we're talking about here was created just after the Garn-St. Germain Act took effect. It was created by real estate attorneys, who I know real well, in California as a joint ownership program for real estate agents that couldn't sell houses at that time because of the way the market was. And then a course was developed as a 3-hour continuing education course for agents in California to teach them how to do this. This was only available for agents for many years in this manner. These attorneys were smart enough that they not only trademarked the name and applied for a patent on the process. Somebody asked me the other day, well, is it patented? No, it's not patented. It's patent pending. Why? Here's what's really interesting. You guys all know the story about the guy walking down the stairs with the chocolate bar and the guy walking up the stairs with peanut butter. They run into each other and it creates this incredible new flavor, the Reese's peanut butter cup, right? They got a patent that lasted 7 years. Have you seen more peanut butter cups out there? Yeah, Butterfinger's got one right now. Why? Because their patent expired after 7 years. Did you realize a pending patent doesn't expire? Now, how is it still pending? Why isn't it patented yet? Because we haven't paid the patent fee. But guess what? Because it's patent pending, we got a patent number and we can still sue for people using our process. What is our process? Very simple. An attorney walking down the stairs had a title and interest. An attorney walking up the stairs had a long-term net lease. They ran into each other, put them together, and boom, new flavor. That process of documentation is patent pending. Yes, we have sued attorneys and gurus for combining those two things and trying to duplicate our process. We got a $50 million judgment on one in Florida. Of course, never collected a damn dime.
Okay.
Okay.
We have Jeffrey says, please go over it one more time on how it will work when the agent is with a brokerage, and what is the name of the realtor course?
It's called the Joint Ownership Program for Real Estate Agents. And as far as the broker, depending on the broker, for example, the example I gave you was a flat fee broker. Their agents just pay them $500 and they get the rest. Sometimes that $100 a month, depending on, and this broker didn't, they get the 100 and then they pay it to their agent. But since it's flat fee, we just paid the broker the $500 at the closing, or part of the closing costs. And then the agent, out of the monthly income from the property, gets $100 a month. And that's just sent directly to them. In fact, the agents don't need to be a beneficiary to receive that. We have an agent agreement that goes with attached to the trust, and they're just one of the payees, just like the mortgage and the taxes and the insurance and cash flow, and things. They're just a payee, right? If they're not a flat fee brokerage and it's a percentage, then the broker gets a percentage. And typically, on those brokers, like a Keller or or a Century or however they do their things. The broker gets the funds and then they pay their agent. And then of course they issue them a 1099, all that kind of stuff. Does that answer the question, Jeff?
I believe it does. We do have one here from Bill Gentry. He says, does the income from the property considered as ordinary income or subject to UBIT? I think this may have been answered previously.
Yes, your income from the property is considered ordinary income, unless, well, it still is, but unless you're using, like our class from last week. And by the way, if you did not attend the class from last week, you really missed something. Unless it's part of not a self-directed IRA, but a solo 401k, then there's absolutely no taxes ever due on it, including UBIT and UBIT. As opposed to a self-directed IRA, anybody that tells you that it's tax-free income with a self-directed IRA doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. There are taxes due on self-directed IRAs, things called UBIT and UBIT, right? You got to pay those. And you know what? The UBIT starts at 37.5% of your profits. 37.5% of your profits. In a self-directed IRA, why the hell would anybody ever use one of those? I thought you're going to use one to avoid tax legally. Now, use a solo 401k. It's all self-administered. It's set up in your own bank and you write checks on it yourself. So now I'm adding all these profits we talked about. I showed you for $10. What if you wrote a $10 check from your solo 401k for this deal? Every dime of that money, including your monthly cash flow that goes right into your 401k, is tax-free forever, period. Sweet, 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 sweet. Now, I know we're taking a little bit long. We're trying to keep it short. And Jay and Paul, I'm going to apologize to you because we're not going to go into fix and flips. But I'm going to tell you one thing, okay? So I was talking to an agent. Hopefully she's on the line. She said she would be with her husband today. So we were talking about, if you will, fix and flips. Guess what, guys? You no longer need to buy the stinking house or borrow money to do your fix and flips unless it's just for the fix. You don't need to buy the house or whatever. If you take the property subject to with trust, let's say it's going to take you 3 months to fix this house up. You put it in trust, and the only money you need to bring in is the contribution enough, the money to pay for all the fix, and then sell the property, just like I did the flip. But now you're fixing it, and then 3 months later, you're selling it. And all you've done is with your seller, you've agreed, look, I'll help you fix this thing up. I'll fix it up. How do you protect yourself? This agent that I talked to on Thursday, hopefully she's here, was all excited because she had a friend say, hey, if you would fix this up for me, that would work out great. And then we could sell it and split the profits or whatever. But she didn't do it. And the reason she didn't do it is she was so afraid. How could she protect herself and all the money that she put into the property that her friend or person would not back out or whatever, or not want to move or whatever, right? Well, it's real easy. You put the property in trust, bring in the funds to fix it. That's your refundable contribution to the trust, your equitable interest in the trust. And then you guys agree to what the split will be when the house sells. Now in 3 months, when the house is all, or 2 months or 1 month, whatever, it's just carpet and paint, who cares, right? Whenever it's done and it's ready for sale, she lists the property, sells it, and they split the profits according to the beneficiary agreement. And all the funds are protected because guess what? That owner now can't back out. It's the ultimate way to protect their interest. And all they had to do was bring in the money just to fix it. They didn't have to buy the property and, you know, get 80% of the ARV loan from a private or a hard money lender, none of that stuff anymore, right? Could they get the money to flip it? You know what? And what's really cool? What if you had a private or hard money lender? They normally want a first position on it if they do you that, right? Guess what? Now you just make them a beneficiary of the trust and it guarantees their return and protects the property. Whole new way of thinking about this stuff, guys. Incredible. Assignments and wholesales, real easy. Just like the flip. Did I not do an assignment or a wholesale deal? Exactly the same thing. Put the property in trust, direct the trustee to sell the property and distribute the proceeds. I literally just assigned it to my own buyer. Or if you want to call it wholesale, go ahead. It's not wholesale, right? Wow, this is mind-blowing stuff, guys. Okay, so listen, bottom line here is this, before I just show you the document process real quick, okay? This is not an alternative to all those what I call inherently dangerous traditional methods. This is the way to do them. It's not an alternative. It's the way to safely and legally do them. So where do you start? So what comes first, chicken or the egg, buyer or seller? The answer is, could be either one, right? I started with the seller. You can start with the buyer. You build your buyer's list. How do you build your buyer's list? I'm trying to race through this, guys, okay? Well, just like you would market for any resident. There's signs in yards, social media, print media, and we go into detail in our training on this, and you've probably been trained on a lot of this before if you're in any of those groups, right? Look at, don't change a damn thing that you're doing with regard to subject to. The only thing you change is your documents. All the pitches that you've given before, all the marketing methods that you've used before, all the types of methods and ways you want to acquire or control a property as before, the only thing you change now is your documents. And it's a total turnkey system. We do it all. You find them, we fund them, or we close them and we split them. What if you don't want to split? Well, that one might cost you because we got to make money too, right? And we don't sell kits, courses, seminars, etc. So again, my best stuff is most of my deals are done by referral from agents and brokers. Okay. So how do we, what do you say to wannabes when they call? So I put these ads out, whatever. Right? Yeah. Thanks for calling. I got that great little house over there on Main Street, and the current house is currently valued at X, and with payments of X. And as long as you can afford the monthly payments and the closing costs, we'll just give you the house. All we ask is, and don't pause, by the way, all we ask is that you sell or refinance the house in a couple of years in your name. And if there happens to be any equitable growth or appreciation in the property over that time, we'll split it with you. Fair enough? That's your entire conversation with the buyer. Now, sometimes they may go, well, what if we don't want to split it? Well, then it's going to be twice the amount of money I want up front or whatever, right? Instead of 5%, it's going to be 10%. And you can keep it all. Everything is negotiable. Well, what are the closing costs? Very similar to a mortgage plus my profit. So about 1.5%, 2% plus my profit. What if I can't afford the monthly payments? Well, thank you for calling and have a nice day. Click. Whatever, right? And we go more into detail on, we have all the scripts, everything are in the back end of the website, which Paula was kind of showing you earlier. We'll show it real quick. So do you suppose, think about this. We already went over this. Do you suppose a renter would pay more for these benefits? Let me tell you what, they do a lot, okay? How do you qualify a resident? Well, when they first call, just that pitch, if you will, that phone script was a qualifier, right? As long as you can afford the monthly payments and the closing costs, we'll give it to you, yada, yada, yada. Then, of course, an application, going to verify income, going to verify employment. I'm working with a company right now to do soft credit polls. Even though we don't qualify them credit-wise, what I want to know is of the 30 to 40 to 50 people that call me within the first few days after I start an ad for a property, I want to know which ones are going to more than likely be able to purchase the house down the road as opposed to someone else. That doesn't necessarily mean credit score. It could mean income, whatever, right? So I'm going to use that, and the soft poll is going to give me all that information, okay? I qualify them. I tell them, look, you go, you haven't seen the house, great. Go drive by the house. Here's the neighborhood. Look at the neighborhood. Let me know if that's where you want to live and that kind of stuff. Maybe they saw a sign in the yard, so they've already driven by. But they go by and they say, give me a call back if it's a neighborhood you want to live in that you think you can afford, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or you can bring them in for a showing. Now, when I show the property, or I have somebody show the property, if I'm not around, you know what I do? I look for people like yourself that are boots on the ground in the area to go show and then split the deal with you, right? If I don't have anybody in the area, I call a local real estate investor association and I say, hey, do you got anybody who would like to show a property and make a few $1,000 bucks? Or I talk to an agent. I really like talking to the agent. Why? guess what? The agent always says, how many of these can you do? Unlimited. Why? Because I'm not taking title to a house myself as an investor, which I'm only limited as an investor, maybe a half a dozen to maybe 10 properties, right, in my name. I'm unlimited. So agent, go find all the kind of people I'm looking for, right? So in fact, one of our members here referred me to their agent who I talked to Thursday. They're looking for houses in Albuquerque. And as I'm talking to the agent, she's like, really? You can do this? This is so cool. Can I do it too? Yeah, okay. Show your client some houses, what they're looking for, and then look for some houses you're looking for, and we'll take care of it. And so out of those people that call, usually about 10% are close to what I'm looking for. 2 or 3 are right on, and I will have 2 or 3, usually never more than 3. I will set up a showing for an agent or somebody that I've selected that the seller is approved of. Okay, that's why I like using an agent too, because then they think they can trust an agent. Not that they can't, but of course they can. So they show up. All 3 show up at the same time. I only have it open for a half hour to an hour. They all show up at the same time. Maybe we'll have them bake some cookies or bring some in or something too. And they go look around the house. They've already received all the information on how the whole thing works. They come in with their deposit. They agree to make the payments. Right? And the one that we select, we collect their initial deposit, which is a minimum of $800. That part's non-refundable. Because once they give us a deposit, then we start creating the trust. We have to pay for legal and accounting and so on, right? And they know this, or they wouldn't do it. And so out of those 3 people or so, one of them is going to say, okay, who do we write check to or whatever? Well, we don't take checks. Okay? We don't take cash. Everything is either by wire or whatever to the escrow. Okay? Now, sometimes they pay the whole thing. It doesn't have to be just a deposit, but the deposit can be the whole thing that we're looking for. And many times, and most of the time, that's the case. So once we receive the initial deposit, whether it's partial or full, then we start creating the trust docs. Let me see. And part of those trust docs are the assignment, the beneficiary, and occupancy agreement. I'll show you those here in a second. Then we collect the remaining of the deposit if they haven't paid it all by then. Then we give them the keys and set a moving date. Okay, same process you do with any other subject to, just different documents. What are the documents? Oh, okay, hold on a second. Where do we find the deals though? The sellers. Like I said, chicken or the egg, same places you've always found them. My favorite place is I get referrals from agents, right? Could you put ads in the paper? Hey, by the way, deals are not found, they're created. Max is going crazy on finding just unbelievable properties. And we're creating the deals. The deals are not found. You can find properties, but we create the deals. Anywhere they're advertised, like newspaper, whatever. You got Craigslist, FSBO sites, things like that, right? Direct mail, yellow mail, if those work for you. Social media, Max is finding a lot of his on social media from what I understand. And of course, referrals. A lot of my referrals come from current residents and current occupants or sellers, the properties I've already done. Okay, so where you find them, that's where you can find them. What do you say to the sellers? Real simple. I make about 10 to 12 calls, or try to make no more than 10 to 12 calls a day. Are these cold calls? I know that that William considers these cold calls. I don't consider them cold calls. Okay, these are warm calls to me. Why? Because these people have advertised their house for sale, and I'm calling to make them a full price offer. I don't think that's cold. They want me to call. So my reply to them is, yeah, hey, I'm calling about your house for sale. Gee, sounds like a nice place while you're selling. Or tell me a little bit more about it. Sounds like a nice place while you're selling. Let me ask you a question. Let me tell you what I'm looking for. If I were to offer you full price, maybe even more, would you be willing to consider leaving your existing financing in place for a few years while we cover all the payments, upkeep, maintenance, and repairs? That's my whole pitch, right? Now, if they say, huh, what are you talking about, Willis? Say, well, in other words, if I were to offer you full price, would you be willing to rent it to us now and let us buy it later? Again, we'll cover all the payments, the maintenance, upkeep, repairs. You won't have landlord duties. We'll get calls in the middle of the night, all that kind of stuff. Yes or no? No, all right, thank you very much, have a nice day. Click, next. But they still say, what are you talking about? Would you take payments for a full price offer? Right? Scripts are real easy. If you got one that works for you, use it. Currently Max does, right? Let me tell you what, after our very first presentation here 2 weeks ago, when we went over some of this, Max's wife, for the first time, got enough guts to get on the phone and start making phone calls, and she found a couple people that we've made offers to. First time she's on the phone, it's a warm call. Now she had some nervousness, of course. She told me about it, but this is what she said. Guy says, sure, send me an offer. Okay, so when they say, oh, I might consider that, or something positive, great. Let me ask you a couple questions, and then I will share this information with my partner, Scott, Jay or Paula, whatever. And if it looked good, then we would love to make you an offer. Great. Okay. And then you ask them the questions. What are the questions? Okay. Yes, our offers require an interest in a trust, not property. Our documentation process, we complete a property profile. That property profile is done on the website. Now, Paula, I'm going to bring this up. Let's see. Okay, so here's the first part of our website. I'm assuming you can all see this, right, Gabe? Paula?
I can see it.
Okay, so here's where when you become a member of the website, which all of you can, no cost, right? This is the member area. And in the member area, this allows you to submit a property. And you complete each of these little, right? And then hit next, right? And what it does is it completes. It completes this. This is a property profile. This is one that Kim, who's on the call today, did the other day. Okay, tells us all about the property, what they owe, what the payments are, what the balances are, right? What the taxes and insurance are, what they're asking, what would it rent for, all that kind of stuff. This as well, right? Once we have this, then we complete a draft of our proposal and send it back to you. Okay. Well, we'll have a conversation on the phone and see where you want to go with this and what we recommend. And then we will create a proposal. That proposal may include, here's our cover letter, say, I'm going to acquire the property, you can place it in trust in your name for your benefit, and we're going to make the payments, right? And then refinance it in a couple of years. Here's the actual proposal with all the numbers. Here's the terms of our proposal. Right? In this case, the property is valued at $290. They owe $124,765. Their refundable equity that they were asking them to carry is $165,000, right? And the payments are $205 a month, with zero of it being paid by the relinquishing party or the seller. What if the payment's a little high? Can we ask the seller to pay part of it? Yes. And then it would say, with X amount of dollars to be paid by the relinquishing party. Okay. Doesn't happen very often, and I don't like to do that, because if they default on their part of it, it does kind of screw things up. So then there's just some points of interest that we have to share with them. And specifically section 15, I won't go into detail on these, where we ask for, and I'll show you here in a minute, you can see section 15, these things, okay? The other part of this, the last part of it, is this is our option agreement. This is our non-exclusive option agreement. It is 4 pages, okay? And it outlines our option and what that entails. Now, what they do is they sign the proposal, include the documents we request, and then they sign the option agreement, okay? Then we go out looking for our resident. Let's see if I can find the resident stuff. I'll just do this. Okay. So again, our proposal, our non-exclusive option, seller retains the documents along with a copy of their warranty or grant deed. Why? Because we need to know what the legal description is. We put that in our proposal. And we also need to know that they are actually the owner, or for example, this one I just showed you, it's actually in an LLC now. So who's the owner? In the deed, it says the LLC is the owner. So we don't put their name, we can put their name on the offer, But as we start drafting documents, especially the trust, it's going to have to be, we're going to have to create a deed from the LLC or the actual owner, exactly how it's written on the deed, to the trustee. Okay, it's our first document we're going to create. We need a copy of their mortgage doc, at least the note part, to see that it's either fixed or variable, what the interest rate is, what the payments are, when it's due, and we need to take a look at the due on sale clause because there's 3 or 4 different types, just so we're familiar with it. Okay, copy of their cover page of their insurance. Okay, to see is it a hazard or landlord policy, or is it a hazard policy or landlord policy, right? Because if it's a hazard policy, it's an owner-occupied policy, and we put a resident in there, now it's a rental, their hazard policy will not cover the property. So it needs to be changed to a non-owner or a landlord policy. Many insurance companies, all you need to tell them is, hey, we're going to be renting our house. We need to change it to a landlord policy. You don't need to say, oh, we're doing subject to, we're putting it in title holding land trust. You don't need to say any of that. The only thing that needs to change is the type of policy and add the additional insured. Who's the additional insured? The new owner, the trustee. And they need to remain insured as well. Okay, we don't need to, but the seller and the trustee do. And any CC&Rs, restrictive covenants and restrictions, sometimes HOA things like that, if they have it. And then a copy of their current mortgage statement, the one they get in the mail. Sometimes it has a current balance. It also verifies the monthly payment and what it's paid for taxes and insurance and so on. Okay, so we need to know those things. Those things all go in the trust, by the way. Okay, so what about the trust? There's 4 basic documents, actually 3 to a basic trust: the trust, the assignment, and the beneficiary agreement. We add a 3rd document, the triple net occupancy and possessory agreement. There are other ancillary documents like a hold harmless. Even though under current legislation, what according to the Garn St. Germain, this does not violate the due on sale provisions, we still have them sign a hold harmless agreement saying, look, at any time they could change legislation. Now they probably won't, and they haven't ever since the inception of these trusts over 100 years ago. Why? Because all your current congressmen, senators, president, and past presidents all hold their properties in this same trust, right? So who's going to pass what or change anything? There's other documents. There could be a promissory note. Maybe, for example, what if I find somebody that's really, really good, that has great income, but they can only bring in 5% instead of 10% like I'm asking? Can I take payments for the other 5? Yeah, I can create a promissory note. What if there's no debt on the property at all? Guess what? I can create a promissory note, and because it's attached to the trust, right? Did you realize the interest on that note is actually tax deductible? We can create a tax deductible lease payment, even if there's no mortgage. You do that with UC1s. We'll talk about those at another time, okay? So here again, we're going to provide you with this. This is what we do for all of our JV partners, no matter who you are, okay? Everything you need to do to make these offers, we actually help you do those, especially in the beginning, including talking with and negotiating with your sellers, your agents, your attorneys. I can't tell you how many times I get on the phone with attorneys and they're just blown away by what I've told them. Yet they try to poo-poo all over our offer, but that's what attorneys do, right? So what I do is, before I talk to an attorney, I have a list of questions that the attorney's got to answer. I send a copy to the seller as well. And if their attorney can't answer right on any of these questions, I advise them to get a new attorney, and I tell the attorney. My job with the attorneys or agent is to call them and say, look, you got a relationship with your client. I want that relationship to remain intact, and I want it to be good. So I'm going to give you the answers to these questions before I send them to them so that you know them. And then you need to tell them if you can do these things or not. And if you can't, then I'm going to advise them that they should not do business with you because you don't know what you're talking about. And I don't think you're that kind of, I always kind of bring it back. I don't think you're that kind of person, right? In other words, sir, ma'am, I did all your Nexus Lexus for you. You're going to look like a giant. And yeah, by the way, you can have your other clients do this too, which I get referrals from them all the time, right? Of course, we always do these weekly Zoom trainings. This was a rehash of our very first one we did a couple of weeks ago. And of course, anytime needed, which we've done many in the last couple of days, is our one-on-ones, with doing your, going over your documents, talking to your sellers, talking to your buyers, talking to your agents, as I told you I did Thursday night. Again, a full turnkey process, full turnkey. The only thing you ever have to do, is just locate the properties, however you market for them, or locate buyers and then locate properties, right? So we include the full legal and accounting process, including the third-party corporate trustee to hold title, and the license and bonded collection and escrow service, all included. Okay, and of course we're here for the rest of your life or my life. If I die first, sorry. Okay, so once a partner, always a partner, or JV partner, so on. Again, you'll get full access. I'll answer your question here in just a second. Full access to our member area, which I showed you to, and we'll also have private Dropbox folders that will be storing all the documents and processing. Okay. Yes, Jay.
Okay, so Sam wants to know: is there a language? Is there language that gives access to the house, even if owner occupied or listed with a realtor?
Yeah, same as any other rental agreement. Because really, it's just a renter or a lease. And so just whatever the laws are in your jurisdiction with regard to how you can enter, I've never entered a property. In fact, I'll bet 95% of the deals I do, I've never seen the property, I've never seen the seller, and I've never seen the buyer. It's all done over the internet, every bit of it, virtual. That's how we started this, right? So, but if it needs to have access to it, then whatever the laws are in your jurisdiction as far as entering rental properties. I think in mine, you have to give them 24-hour notice. Okay. I don't ever hold keys. I've never had a key to a property except my own. So there's full ownership rights, quiet enjoyment. Why would I ever need to enter the house? Well, I have seen one. I didn't actually go to enter it that way, but one of the evictions that we did, I went and took a look at it later. It was in my neighborhood, a friend of mine that we did this with. And we just went and looked at the house and looked how messy it was. And we cleaned it up and then just sold it. We made about 30 grand on it, even after evicting Barbara. Right? We made about 30 grand when we sold the house. She got none of it because she didn't want to make a payment. Okay? So whatever your jurisdictional rulings or laws are in your area with regard to a landlord doing a property, and that kind of thing is lined out also in the occupancy agreement. Okay. Anything else, Jay?
Yeah. Farouk says, does this work? If yes, how? If the property needs rehab? I'm not sure I understand that, but
We kind of just went through that. For example, let's say we find a house that we want to fix and flip, right? Just kind of went over that. I take the property and recommend you take the property subject to seller willing, of course, right? Someone wants you to just buy the damn thing, but I want to buy it yet. I don't even want to buy it, period. I just want to fix it up and then sell it and make all the money from it. Or split the money with the seller. They really like that, by the way, okay? I just say, look, let's put the property, I'll fix up the property so that we can sell it for a lot more. How's that, right? And they go, oh, really, a lot more? Okay. So we'll come to this agreement. We'll just put this property in a trust in your name, and then I'll be one of the beneficiaries. And then what I'll do is I'll bring a whole bunch of money into the trust, and we'll use that money to fix up the property, and then we'll sell it for gobs and gobs of money, and then you and I can split, okay? That's the answer to your question. Can you come in and buy it with a trust with money that you might have to buy the property? Absolutely, you could do it that way too. I'm just saying, why buy it if you don't have to? Does that help, Farouk?
he says, yep, he's got it.
Perfect. Okay, so again, how do we work together? Well, we can do these one-on-ones. Geez, we talked with Kim and Queen, and we talked with Max and Lee, and geez, some of these guys I've worked with for a few years, right? So one-on-one anytime. Usually, if you want a one-on-one, then what's going to happen as soon as you complete a property profile, it's going to drop it into our email, and we're going to see it. We know that we need to talk about it. But I recommend you almost email us and say, hey, I just completed a profile. It's called this file. And then we'll get on a Zoom call or a conference call, go over it. And then when we'll set up a conference call with your seller or agent or attorneys, whoever, We use either the conference call line, which we use a lot, and we record all the calls so that we can put those recorded calls right in your Dropbox so you can listen to them over and over. And guys, sometimes these calls don't end up like you want. Sometimes people get angry, you know, when they really understand what we're offering. I thought you were going to offer me cash. No, we said full price if you leave everything in place. Well, thank you much for playing. Have a nice day. Click next. Right? Whatever. Who cares? Right? And then we do our group calls like this and Saturday mornings and conference line. We already talked about that. Guys, that's pretty much all I got. We're wide open for questions right now. And I appreciate your patience. I did go a half hour longer than I said I would. But you know me, that's pretty good for me. Last time I went an hour. So I'm wide open for questions, and I'll stay here as long as you want me to. And again, this has all been recorded. And these recordings are all found in the member area of, let me see here.
Scroll down.
They're all found right here in the member area of the website, right here under JV classes. So here's the very first one. Here's here was our 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks, yeah, 2 weeks ago. Last week or 3 weeks ago, this was the week before, and then just absolutely unbelievable, the 401k recording, right? So with Mike McDermott. And by the way, if you haven't, if you would like, and you haven't yet received a copy of Mike's book, he has allowed me to send you a PDF version. But what we might want to do is actually put that on here now. I asked him and he said, okay. So we'll put a copy of that in here for you all to download, just like all these, for example, all of the scripts, here's the benefits. This is all for you, okay? Here's the benefits for the seller. You can print this out, you can share it with sellers, etc. Right? Okay, let me go to that. There's also, and there's the scripts in there, right? Here's an article about thinking about doing lease options. If you do, you're crazy, and why. And here's again more benefits and all about how the title and trust transfer works. A couple pages, all their benefits, right? And you can share that. I usually like to share it verbally, but if you feel so inclined to send that to a seller, and then also documents for residents, right? Our scripts, including our application and so on. I don't think their application's in here yet, but ads on how to attract them. And then in your Dropbox, you'll have all these too. For example, so here's a Dropbox, right? Let's do this. Well, we'll just look at Nexus. So here's all your marketing material. Here's marketing stuff for sellers, and here's marketing stuff for buyers. So you got just tons of stuff, right? Okay. And here's all the information on dealing with and marketing and working with agents and mortgage brokers. And here's legal information. Here's the article on obtaining legal advice. And yes, I do have a legal opinion, hard copy on in my possession. For those of you like Andrew, not mentioning names here, that like that kind of stuff. I do have a hard copy. And this legal advice is really not a legal opinion. It actually is, oh, it's not there. Where'd it go? Anyway, it's not actually a legal opinion, but it is not a gigantic paid legal opinion, but it is an opinion by an attorney of our process and so on. And he highly recommends using it. Okay. So all that is available to you. And then of course, my favorite video of all time, I listen to this video every single morning. I used to work for this company years and years ago. And this is Art Williams. It's about 5 minutes long, and I highly encourage you to make it part of your daily routine. I wake up in the morning, get my cup of coffee, and then I let Art jack me all up. Okay, back to questions.
All right. Kimberly Williams says, when you have a net occupancy agreement with the resident buyer for 2 years, 11 months, and 29 days, you mentioned doing a day-to-day holdover after that for how?
Yes. Oh, God, that's a great question. So check this out. Like I said before, you realize that the IRS considers any lease of longer than 3 years or has it been extended past 3 years, even if it goes month to month after the 3 years is up, is technically considered a sale in the eyes of the IRS. So if it does, I don't want to do that. All of our net occupancy agreements are 2 years, 11 months, and 29 days. It cannot go to a 30-day, month to month after that. It is simply a day-to-day holdover. The lease is not extended, right? If the term of the trust needs to be extended, maybe we do it as a 5-year deal. And at the end of 5 years, let's say the value's not there yet for them to get refinancing, or let's say that they can't qualify yet. Either we're going to let them move out or we're going to put somebody else in, or we're just going to extend the term of the trust, but it continues on a day-to-day holdover. Okay. They still make the same lease payment. Well, it could be more. I have deals where we graduate the payment. I tell them, look, the first year it's going to be $1,200 a month. Next year it's going to be 13, and the next year it's going to be 14. Whatever we agree to, and you can do all that. Okay?
Okay, so her question is, can you just do another occupancy agreement for another 2 years, 11 months, and 29 days?
No,
Okay, that's her
that's just like doing a month to month. There's no difference. You
Okay.
can't extend or add a leasehold. But
Awesome.
it can just go from day to day.
So Kevin Campbell says, how much is the creation of the trust docs for us? And is it paid to which company? And then you mentioned the resident pays a non-refundable $800. Is that the amount? How is it paid? And the resident puts the monthly into a trust, and the trust pays for the documents.
Okay, so you don't pay a dime ever, unless you want to give somebody $10. Again, I can't remember the last time I gave a seller a $10 bill. It just says I did to take possession. Okay. So as far as the cost, the resident pays for everything. So let's say it's a $300,000 property and we're asking for 5% plus 2 monthly payments. That includes the first month and 1 month that goes into the trust account, the contingency fund. Okay. Which the trustee holds. Okay. The escrow service actually holds it. Trustee doesn't hold anything. Trustee only holds title to the property. That's it. Period. Nothing else. Okay. They can't hold any money because then there would be risk and liability. And the trustee is exempt from things like lawsuits, for example. Exempt maybe is the wrong word. They're not suable if they don't own or hold anything. And because they're only holding title to the trust for the benefit and at the full direction and sole direction of the beneficiaries, they're not considered the owner for attaching a property if the trustee gets sued. Okay. So as far as the cost, when we calculate the cost on our closing documents, it's at 1% of the property's mutually agreed value plus the $800. Okay, $800 for legal, accounting, for the actual trust and the documentation and processing. What's the 1%? That's how we make our money. It's our royalty. Okay. However, that 1% is calculated in as far as the documents, because the seller sees that and they think, oh, we're having to pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 to do this, so we're putting up something. The actual cost, which the resident really pays, is they actually pay all that. But as far as your cost is concerned, that's not really the right term. Is 0.5% of the property's value. So in this case, it would be instead of what is it, 3,000, it'd be $1,500 plus $800. So of the 15 grand they brought in, subtract that amount, and the rest of it you put right and hit National Bank. It's in your pocket, or you split that with us. Does that answer the question?
They said yes. Kevin Campbell says, in case of rehabbing the property and splitting the profits with the seller during the rehab after the seller moves out, who makes the monthly mortgage payments, and what happens if the rehab takes longer than expected?
The seller always makes the payments until we either sell or put a residence in the property. We are never obligated to make a payment, ever. The only thing we're obligated to do, let's just say we get to the end of a term, or we have to evict a tenant, for example, and we can't find another one. That's why there's money in the contingency fund, because that'll now make the current payment, and we now have a current payment, and our only obligation is to give them back the property with the payments current and the house in good condition. we can totally walk away. We have no risk or liability whatsoever. If it goes longer, it just goes longer. Seller's going to continue making the payments until the deal's done, right? Like on a fix and flip, if they have payments. Now, here's the thing, and Jay and I, we figured out, we had one that we were working on a couple of years ago, where the lady husband died the day after he retired at their retirement dinner. God, can you imagine that? At their retirement dinner, he has a heart attack and dies the day after he retires. She remained in the house for 4 or 5 years, but couldn't maintain it because she was getting elderly. She's now in a home. She still is. We ended up not doing this deal because some of the stupid family members that had no interest in the property whatsoever came in and took over her property for her with no permission. Okay. House was out. It's like one of those houses you see on the with all the junk all over and everywhere. Jay, did you go in the house with me? Did you see it?
I did.
Oh my goodness, it was crazy. And the whole basement was her husband's man cave with all of his sports memorabilia, but stuff everywhere. And it stunk like crazy. And so what the deal was is she was still making the payments on the house, but she hadn't been in it for 2 years. But she was still making the payments. So what our deal was is that we figured that it was going to take us as much as a year to rehab this property. We were going to add another level and make a garage out of the carport and so on, because it'd be pretty extensive. So our offer, it was going to take us $130,000 to do all this work. So we're going to do sub 2 instead of buying a house for $300,000 or $250,000, and it was in a $650,000 neighborhood. We were not going to buy the house for $250,000, but we were going to bring in the money, fix up the house, right? Our money is secured by the trust, and then sell the house when we got done. But our agreement also, part of that $130,000, we agreed to make the payments for a year, or up to a year, right? So that was included in our estimated holding costs, or our estimated cost to repair. So part of that $130,000 was like a $1,500 a month house payment for a year. We figured that in, and you can do that too. If they want to continue, or you want them to continue making the payment, fine, go ahead. But you can also negotiate to have to make that payment. But guess what? You might negotiate that you'll make the payment during the rehab process, but you're obligated to do that if you agree to. But guess what? You didn't have to do. You didn't have to buy the house. You just took it sub 2, made the payments, fixed it up, and sold it. Does that help?
I believe so. Okay, so question from Sam. Sam says, it's fair to say for sub 2s, we're looking for houses in great condition, no repair. How do we handle repairs if you get any residual for a residential beneficiary?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
So no, I just don't go looking for nice houses in nice neighborhoods. I call and look for any seller willing to leave their financing and equity in place for a couple of years, period. I don't care what condition the house is in. Why? Because I can make multiple offers. Some of these ones that we're dealing with Sam right now were just like, oh my gosh, if you saw the pictures, we died laughing with each other the other night looking at the pictures of some of these houses. Literally, no kidding, shacks. No running water, no toilets. Shacks. And some of them in such ill repair and mess. What would be our offer? Well, depending on what they're asking and depending on what the values are in the neighborhood of the areas, will depend on if we even make an offer. Our offer could be subject to, we'll come in, fix it up, and sell it. Give you what you want, but we may need to negotiate. I mean, I know one guy, he was asking like 50 grand, but we figured we could only offer him 5 to make any money on this, based on the profit calculations and spreadsheets that Paula has put together, right? Others, we all of a sudden decided, like I think on one that Kim's doing right now, Princess Kim, that we decided we need to make a little bit more offer than what they were asking, and we can still do the deal. Okay. So all of them are different. It doesn't matter where they are. Is it nice to have nice houses in nice neighborhoods with nice payments? Absolutely, right? But I'm not limiting myself to just looking for those. I would urge you, although we can do the things like what Max has come up with, and then he's got others too, is there a golden area or criteria? You know what? How about middle America? Look for the medium range in your area. Maybe that's where you start. I always call the landlords first that are renting and say, hey, would you be willing to sell? Maybe sell on terms. I'd be willing to offer you a full price if you're willing to consider it. Yes, no, maybe so. Right, thanks. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Right? And then I call all the houses for sale for that. Right? My deal is every day I make at least one offer. Now, yesterday I made 6. 6 offers. Haven't called the sellers back yet, so I don't know how that's going to work out. But some of you have 4 or 5 or 6 just by yourself that we're ready to make offers on, just by making a couple calls or using your marketing methods, whatever it is. Right? So it doesn't matter. If you like, I've got a guy in California, Eddie. He doesn't make houses on less than $1 million. Of course, that's easy in California, right? Nothing under $1 million. So what's the difference between a $100,000 house and $1 million house? A 0. That's it. A 0. Or a $10 million house, 2 zeros. Right? It doesn't make a difference. If they need work, they need work. So what about during the term? You kind of threw that in. What happens if it needs work? Well, guess what? If it's just carpet paint or lipstick on a pig, whatever you want to call it, a lot of times we'll have a resident that we will agree that they will do all the work. They want to make it their own. And here's what I do. In every one of the ads I run when I run a house, I don't care if it's brand new, hasn't been lived in yet, and the builder allows me to take it, which I do all the time. Okay? We take it sub 2 because the builder has already converted it to a permanent loan, and now they're trying to sell the darn thing, or the person that bought it's an investor and converted it to permanent loan but can't find the buyer. Then we take it. But what if it doesn't need anything? I mean, it's beautiful. Get those all the time. I still put in my ad either fixer or something along that line, right? Needs a loving touch. Doesn't every house need a loving touch? Come on. That's what a house is. That's how you make a house a home, right? So something along that line. Why do I do that? Because now I get people that want to make it their own and do it their way. And I get other investors calling saying, hey, do you need money, or can I fix it? Or are you hiring contractors? These guys have money and they're good at what they do typically, and so on. And now guess what? I've got a list of buyers. You've heard things like that before in some of the classes and things you've taken before, right? Now you got a list of people with money and experience. And guess what? They always know people that would want to get into a property, because why? They're the guys that buy it, fix it, flip it, sell it. So now I turn them into guys that would like to just take it sub 2, fix it, and sell it. And now they don't have to put up all that damn money or borrow harder private money, right? You got to learn how to monetize every call, every ad. What happens if I have 30, 40, 50 calls on a property, and yet I have, I can only put one person in? What do I do with everybody else? Well, maybe only 2 or 3 are uniquely qualified for what I'm looking for. Guess what? Now I got 2 or 3 people. This really helps solve the chicken or the egg thing. Now I got 2 or 3 other people that I didn't put in this house that are qualified for what I like to do. Now I just start calling sellers and say, hey, I got a client, or I got a friend or a partner that likes your house, and they're willing to offer you a full price if you're willing to take payments for a couple of years. Would you be willing to consider a full price offer for that kind of a deal? Yes, no, maybe so. No, thank you very much. Have a nice day. Click next. And I keep calling till I find 1 or 2. Now I got 2 other sellers or 2 other buyers looking for 2 more properties that I can do. Talk about daisy chain. But now what do I do with the other 25 or so that I took apps on, or that I didn't even take an app, said they couldn't afford payments or closing costs? Well, guess what? Now I refer them to my financial programs or credit programs that I may make 10 or 20 bucks on per month from them. Monetize every single call, every single contact, monetize. Seller, where are you moving? Why are you selling? Oh, we're moving to Georgia. Oh, you found a house yet? No. Hey, I got a couple. You need a referral for an agent? What kind of house you looking for? I may have one of those shacks out in the swamp. It's good for you, right? Or in Arkansas out in the holler, right? Next question.
All right, so average turn time from seller call agreeing to this setup to location and placement of resident.
Okay, so from the time of the call, it usually takes us 1 or 2 days to get them the proposal that we need because we have Paula. Paula actually is an agent. She has access to things. She runs comps and runs numbers on the thing. Now, if we don't want to make an offer, then we just let the seller know that the numbers don't work for us. No big deal. If we want to make an offer, then we will put together our proposal. I showed you a little bit of that. We'll put together our proposal. Then I will email the seller. And I have 2 little paragraphs in the body of the email with the terms of proposal and our option agreement, and with the request that here's what I ask him to do. And I tell the seller this on the phone, but I tell him again in the email, right? Tell him what you told him, right? And then repeat. So I send him the proposal along with the email that says, remember, I asked you to print out our proposal and the option agreement. Please read it thoroughly. Don't just skim it. Highlight any of the areas you have comments, questions, or concerns. And if you choose to share it with somebody you trust in these matters, like an agent or an attorney or whatever, share it with them and have them highlight all the areas of comments, questions, concerns. And then let's set up a conference call. We'll answer all your questions. And hopefully we can answer them to your satisfaction or answer what concerns you have. And if you like what we do and you're agreeable, then we can agree to terms, sign it, send it back. If not, we really thank you very much for considering my proposal. That usually takes 2-3 days. Okay. Once they agree to the proposal, it could take as long as a week, depending on how we communicate and get back and forth. Once they sign everything, we immediately now have the right to start marketing for a resident. And what we do also, one thing I didn't put in here is we get a memorandum of option and record it at the county recorder's office. Now that prevents anybody else from coming in and buying a house around us. Even though we give the seller the non-exclusive option, right? And they can continue selling or marketing any way they want. And yes, I have sellers that have called up and said, hey, I think we want to accept this other offer. In that case, they give me the $10 back if I gave it to them, and we just walk away. Can I hold them to it? Absolutely, because our option says that the offer that they are willing to accept has to be better than ours. What's better than full price? And you know what? I don't care. I've never enforced that on any seller that's ever said, I think we just want to do something else. I said, great, send me my $10, we're done. Why? I don't have time to argue, sue, or fax, whatever. It doesn't make a difference, right? The only time they're obligated to follow through is if I have already collected a deposit from a resident that we're arranging to move in, and then they can't back out. They have to give me 15 days to close the rest of the deal. Okay, so a little bit of the timeline, but it usually takes 30 to 45 days on average for me to find the person I'm looking for, whichever way. Can it take longer? Sure, but in my agreement, if it's more than 90 days, my option expires. Can I renew the option? Just like a listing agreement with an agent, can we renew the option with them? Absolutely. Have I? Yes, many times. I have a property that we've had under contract like that for over a year. Special property. Good thing is it was free and clear. Okay. So there were no payments that had to be made. There were some taxes, insurance, and things like that, but the seller was already paying those. And I've had similar ones that didn't take as long, but maybe 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, just with the way the market is, so on. Okay. Does that answer timelines?
I believe yes. Rachel Davis says, do you have a home inspection done? And I'd like to hear your answer, and I can answer that for us too.
No, I don't. I know Jay does. I don't. Let me tell you why. I'm not the one that's going to live in it. If they want to do a home inspection, let them hire somebody and have them inspect the home. I don't pay for crap. My expense is $10 and the cost of my use of my cell phone, right? So if they want to inspect the home, they ask. I have them ask all the time. And the agent usually asks for them if there's an involved. How about a home inspection? Great, they'll get one. I'm sure the seller doesn't mind, right? They were trying to sell anyway. They'll get I had one in Roy, Utah here a couple of years ago where their inspector came out. It's not one of these deals. And he just totally trashed the house. It did need some work. But this guy was a veteran and he was going to have to qualify for a VA loan, right? So all the things that VA requires had to be taken care of before I even put him in as a resident. But guess what? He went and did all those repairs before he even moved into the house. And then we had him checked off 3 times, I think, by the inspector before VA approved that he could even move into the house, even before he got a loan. Now, he's already refinanced in his name because it was only like a year and a half before he did that. But everything was taken care of before he even applied for his VA loan.
Okay, great answer. So on our end, Rachel, we always do an inspection because on most of ours we're doing fix and flips, and even if we're doing a wholesaler or signing our contract, we want to make sure that we know everything that's going wrong with that property so we can give it to the end buyer or the investor. Okay, John Ray wants to know, when you place the house in trust, do you have to say, or do you have to pay a transfer tax?
No. When you do commercial, I've only had to pay a transfer tax once. Sometimes commercials, I've seen people have to pay as high as $1,000 for the transfer fee or transfer tax on a commercial. I've only ever had to pay it once, and I had to pay $100, and that was on a 12-unit former motel, now apartment building that I did in eastern Utah. As far as a transfer tax, I have had, I can't remember if it was Pennsylvania. It was back east where the county recorder or whoever it was wanted a transfer tax. And we said, no way, we're just placing it in our revocable living trust. There is no transfer tax for that. And they backed off.
Okay, great answer. Farouk says, I apologize if I'm confusing this, but when the investor finds a buyer, is the deal always structured like a lease to own, or can it be structured anyway?
Any way you want. What if they just want to buy the house? Now we just do what I said earlier. We don't have to do, there's 2 types of trust that we use. One is a simple trust, which is the kind that you and I would just put our houses in for our personal resident, or for somebody that just wants to protect the property in a very simple trust, couple $100, right? And then just do a rental, right? They just have a renter. There's no rights or options or anything to buy. They're just going to buy and hold, right? They buy it in a trust or take a sub 2. If they take a sub 2, then it's a full, what we call the full equity holding type trust, where you're going to put a resident in there and they're going to lease the property with the right to buy. So there's 2 types, right? But you can negotiate anything you want, just depending on what type of trust is going to need to be used as to what the costs are going to be. So a full, a simple trust, let's say for your personal property, or one you're just going to do the flip type of thing, total cost is $539. So it's $395 for the actual trust, and then $144. It's $12 a month, but it has to be paid annually. $144 for the annual trust holding fee, the trustee holding fee. Trustee is required by law to charge a fee for their service, commensurate to industry standards. So just for a simple trust, $12 a month or $144 a year. As far as the included in the lease payment for the lease to own, or if you will, if you want to call it that way, you can do that. Is a minimum of $40 a month, maximum of $140, depending on the value of the property. And it's based on the value of the property, at a half a point divided by 12 type of thing. But we usually never charge more than $50 a month for the holding fee, and that's included in the lease payment. You don't pay that.
Okay, we've got another one from Andrew. In a climate of falling values, does the renter or owner model inside the trust make more sense?
Oh, absolutely. I love those. Why? I'm going to have a long time. I'm going to have more of a long-term renter than I ever thought. Maybe I did a deal for 2 or 3 years or a 5-year deal, but now let's say what's going to, and you guys have heard me say this, you thought 2008 was going to be bad. Wait till you see what's coming. Values are going to drop by almost half in a lot of areas. So what if you have people in those, and now this $300,000 house is now a $150,000 house? So what? Who cares? Does that mean that they can't afford the rent payment anymore? No. Does it mean they won't? No. Does it mean they're going to move and try to find another house? No. Will they? Maybe. Who cares? I just replace them, right? And so what if that happens? We just extend the term, as we talked about before. Not necessarily the lease, right? But the term. Maybe it's a 5-year term and now the property's half its value. Well, just like the big $1 million property example I gave you. Guess what? This guy's going to keep making the payments till the house is paid off, which is another 8, 9, 10 years. So what's the house going to be valued at another 8, 10 years? And if these people are living and enjoying all the fee simple bundle of rights of real estate ownership without having to give a mortgage, why would they ever move? Or why would they ever not want to keep making payments, right? Is it possible? Sure. But somebody's going to want to live in it and make the payments. People got to live somewhere. And where are you going to find these people? Guess what? There has already been, I can't remember what they were saying on the news the other day about these people that are all filing forbearance. God forbid these people. I don't understand. They just they don't get it. I know they think they need it. These guys are going to have to come in with all these back forbearance payments, and they're going to be foreclosed on. It's sad. Do they need a place to live? Hey, guess who they call? Why? Because I can get them a house. No qualifying, no credit. 3.5% plus 2 payments moves you in. Where are they going to get the money? I don't care. That's what's great about what we do too. It doesn't matter where the money comes from. We don't need source season funds. We don't, it could come from mom and dad. It could come from their rich uncle. It could come from, and guess what? Mom and dad or their rich uncle is actually a beneficiary of the trust for the amount that they paid the kids to get in the house. Because now the money goes back to them when the kids buy the house, not the kids. And I'm telling you, there are so many ways to twist and turn this thing, you can't believe it, right? Doesn't matter what the house value is. It doesn't matter what's owed on the house, ever.
Okay, I have a question here from Vahishwa. I hope I'm saying that right. But a newly built home can't be sold, so it's on the market for rent by a property management company here in Idaho Falls. Can I reach out to the property management company for a full price offer, or how do I reach the owner not showing up on assessor's site?
Well, property managers have to be real estate agents. They have to be licensed. Okay, so you're calling a real estate agency. In some states, they can also be listing and retail sales agents for either buyers or sellers, and they can also be property managers. In other states, they can only be a property manager or only be an agent to sell, buy and sell, right? They can't be both. I think they just changed the laws in my state. They can be both now. I'm not sure if you know that, Paul or Jay. But anyway, so you're talking to a licensed real estate agent. Whether they can do both or not doesn't matter. Yes, I talk to property managers, and a lot of the properties you're going to call on are actually property manager ads, right? Especially when you're calling rentals. Say, look, I know you're asking for rent, but would the owner consider selling? Now, why would a property manager want the owner to sell when they're making property management fees, right? Sometimes what I do with the property manager is I say, look, I want to make an offer to buy the property. I'd like you to continue as a property management company. Why would we need a property? We don't. But what if they got to keep making payments but didn't have to deal with property or getting payments? Like, what if they were getting, like, it's a $15 payment, they're charging 10%, they're getting 150 a month. So what if you could get $100 a month and never have to manage the property? How many of those would you like to have? Oh God, an ungodly sum we'd love to have. We never had to collect rents. We never had to improve properties. We never had to do rental ads. We never had to do evictions. But yet you gave us $100 a month just because we made the referral? You're dang right we would. So that's why they would maybe get a hold of the seller and say, look, I have somebody that wants to make a full price offer on the house under the terms you're renting. Let them rent it for another 3 years and then buy down the road. And we'll stay as the property managers. We'll manage the whole process. They won't either. They won't do a damn thing. Okay. So, but most property managers will totally shut you down. No, our seller doesn't want to do that. That's why they're renting. No, they're renting because they can't sell. You and I both know that. They have long-term holds. Yeah, I know. But eventually they're going to have to sell. They're going to want to sell, right? And because it's a non-owner occupied property and because it's accelerating in value or well over the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, when they sell, how are they going to avoid the taxes on the sale? They don't get an exemption on non-owner occupied properties. They only get it on their personal property. You got an answer for him, Mr. Property Manager? I don't think so. I do.
Okay. Sorry, another question here from Max. This is one I can answer. He wants to piggyback on the current climate question. Do you all have any concerns doing rehabs now? Several investors have now stopped taking on rehabs until the dust settles. Max, it completely depends on your ability, because the market, what we saw in 2008 and through 2012 is that the market for real estate does not plummet like it does in the stock market. The stock market overnight can drop 20,000 points. Everybody loses everything. They're jumping out of buildings. But in real estate, even if it goes down, even if it's going to plummet, it's slower to move down and to react to that. So the answer to your question is, I still do rehabs, and I'll still recommend doing rehabs if you're very good at getting in and out fast. And I'm talking, if you can do this in 4 to 6 weeks and be in and out, have that property sold, you can beat the adjustments to the market as it's going down and still get out before you lose everything. But
Sorry, Jake.
Go ahead.
So one of the reasons people are so excited about sub 2 right now is because of this adjustment in the market that's happening or is going to happen. And we're talking sub 2 where you're taking a sub 2 and putting a resident in the property, whatever method you use, right? You can see it all over the internet, all over the groups. That's why there are sub 2 groups on Facebook and so on. Because there's going to be so many of these properties that these people can't sell because they owe more than it's worth now. Or there's going to be so many of these properties where they got to sell, right? What do you do with a person that's 3 months behind in the forbearance and has to make it up? Can you place it in trust and bring in some of your own money or another friend's or investor's money to contribute to the trust to bring the loan current to do this? Absolutely. The payments are still the payments. As long as that loan is current, we can do this, right? And anybody can bring a current. If you're doing things like that right now and you're all excited about, oh boy, this is going to be great, I'm going to be able to take property subject to do seller financing, all I have to do is bring their loan current and then put in my resident. Yep, you can. Just change your document. And you can avoid all those risks and liabilities of other methods.
Okay, great answer. And then Vince is saying, in buying pre-foreclosures, do you have to ask the seller to move or evict them?
I never leave a seller in a property. I've done that before. I kind of do it 2 ways here. So what you'll see, and in my neck of the woods, and in a lot of your states, you better find this out. Some of you guys are real good at investigating this stuff like Andrew, right? Did you know there's a thing called a lender leaseback law? There is in my state. Did you know it's illegal to buy somebody's house and lease it back to them with the right or option to purchase it back? It's illegal. Can't do that. Now, I've never known anybody that's ever been prosecuted. Well, some that have really screwed people. I've heard it in the news and things like that. But I've never really heard of anybody. And that's what somebody did to my aunt. She was behind, that kind of thing. But here's the deal. If you were to do this and leave somebody in, here's how I would do it. So yes, I would have them put it in trust. I would bring in money either through an investor or a private party to bring the loan current. So now it's current. And here's what I do. You never, ever, ever steal their equity or take their equity. You leave it all intact, minus maybe a small, well, not minus a small fee. We'll just say leave it intact. Then you create the occupancy agreement for $100 a month less than what they were paying in their mortgage payment. Why do you do that? I'll tell you here in a second. So the investor or money that you bring in is not only enough, we kind of touched on this earlier, not only enough to bring the loan current, but enough at least for the first year to offset that $100 a month reduction in the payment. So the investor would bring in, let's say 10 grand to bring the loan payment, loan current. They'd also bring in another $1,200. So now 11,200 bucks. So that the monthly payment, that extra $100 would make the extra $100 payment. And now your resident, who was the owner of the house and really still is, makes $100 less. But now what they do is they work on their credit and that kind of stuff. And their loan's current now, right? Now let's say it takes them 24 to 36 months to improve their credit on that kind of thing. So let's say it's 2 years. So the investor bring another 2,400. They make all their payments on time for 1.5 to 2 years. I can guarantee if they make all their payments on time and keep their financial status clean, that they're going to be able to refinance. And that's the key. A resident in our trust gets to refinance the property in most cases, not just get a new purchase loan, but a refinance in their name. And they put it back in their name and they refinance. And there's nowhere along the line. What if they default? Now, what if they default again with us? It's a matter of a simple eviction. And they can never claim that we ever took unconscionable advantage of them. Their payment was reduced by $100 a month, and they still own all their equity, which is now in trust and protected. So when the house is sold to someone else, they get their equity. They didn't lose a dime. And we didn't screw them like a lot of guys do, okay, stealing their equity. So check out the laws in your state. There's something like a lender leaseback law in your state. So I don't go checking them out. I don't do that. I never leave anybody in a property. I just say, look, we're willing to make you an offer on your house. Willing to make you a full price offer. We'll bring your loan current. And then when we sell the house, we'll give you a check for all the equity that you left, if any at all, right? Now, can I buy their equity, or can the money we bring in buy some of the equity and maybe buy at a discount? Absolutely. How we do that is just in the offer price too. Right? But I always leave something for them. They can never say that we took unconscionable advantage of them, whether they stay in or leave. They always have something. Okay?
All right. That appears to be all of our questions.
Cool. I'm hungry. Guys, I really appreciate y'all being on here and hanging around with us. I'm glad that the last hour was a lot of really good questions, by the way. And I love having some of you on here that I haven't talked to in a while, and especially some of our guru friends, if that's a term I can use, to understand more about how I work and how we work at Smart REIA and with Jay and Paula. And we've been very fortunate that some of the folks like William and Jeff and that kind of thing have allowed us to participate in their sub-2 group. I really like what they do. I've known both these guys, some of these guys, for several years now. We've crossed paths a few times, and it's nice to have them attend and understand what we do, so that they can feel good about. And I always talk them up because I know who they are, and they're honorable people. So thank you very much for allowing us to join your groups and educate a little bit some of the folks, and try to help protect people, their safety and their finances and so on. So I appreciate it. Thank you. And Jay and Paula, thanks for let me babble on. So All right, guys, I'm done with you, Ard, and I am hungry, and I need a nap. I'm getting old. All right, guys. Anything else, Jay, Paula?
Yeah, no, thanks again, everybody, for your time. Just remember, let's work together. We're in this together. Go out and let's create some deals that other investors can't do and make some money that other investors can't make. And happy quarantining, guys.
All right. Sam says very ethical. Farouk, thank you very much. Great content. Thank you for taking the time to answer questions. Guys, I'm always here. If you don't have my email, most of you do. I have two emails. Here's what I want you to do. My email is thesmartrei, THESMARTREI @gmail.com. And the other email is Equity Holding Trust, all one word. And I'll put those up here. Equity Holding Trust @gmail.com. The only reason I use the Equity Holding Trust is sometimes when I use to make offers. And if you have not received a copy of the 401k book yet, email me at equityholdingtrust@gmail.com and just put in 401k book in the subject, and I will email it back to you. You are absolutely going to just freak out when you read this book. It'll change the way most of you invest or want to invest. Okay? All right, guys. Thanks very much. I am out of here. Thanks, Jay and Paula.
All right. Have a good weekend, guys. We'll see you out there.